Chapter 645. However, the ministers did not share the same thoughts. They initially thought that there was no other way. Once the three nations arrived, they would definitely be besieged. They did not expect the other party to propose a marriage alliance. Their eyes lit up as if they had seen hope. Someone stepped forward and said to Elder Su Wu with a smile, "The War Dragon Empire and the Xianyuan Kingdom have always had a close relationship. It would be great if we could strengthen our ties through marriage." Elder Su Wu smiled when he heard this. Lord Chen is right. The two of them chatted back and forth, and it was quite a warm atmosphere. Zongjing Wenren did not listen to what the people below were saying. He stood tall and straight and looked at Bailey Jiaju, who was sitting in the seat of honor. He slowly opened his mouth and said, "Brother Bailey, Wenren has arrived on time for the 3-year promise." Zongjing Wenren smiled elegantly, but if one listened carefully, one would realize that there was a hint of provocation in his tone. Helian Weiwei listened from the side and heaved a long sigh. "Youngster, you can't be like this. Not only is His Highness a clean freak, he also has mild face blindness. He simply won't remember any 3 years promise." Sure enough, within Bailey Jiaju's pair of beautiful eyes, there wasn't the slightest ripple. He only raised the corner of his eyes, his left hand supporting the armrest of the chair, unhurriedly opened his mouth. Within the clear coldness, there was a unique grace. "Who are you? Who are you? Who are you?" Even Zongjing Wenren could not help but clench his fists when faced with this question. The anger in his eyes deepened. Is this man trying to intimidate me? Even if he has forgotten about me, someone has just mentioned my name. How dare he ask me who I am? Helian Vivian held back her laughter and reminded him, he is the crown prince of the Xianyuan Kingdom. Oh? Beligaju supported his face with one hand and furrowed his brows. It was as if he was trying to recall who the crown prince of the Xianyuan Kingdom was. Zongjing Wenren's eyes turned cold. He maintained his smile and said, "It seems that Brother Bailey has finally remembered. I was still looking forward to having a match with you so that we can determine who is better." Beligaju held his chin and curved his thin lips. "As you wish." Helian Vivian watched as Zongjing Wenren slowly sat down. She turned to look at Beligaju and asked, "Do you really remember who he is?" "No." Beligaju absent-mindedly turned the black jade thumb ring on his finger, and the smile at the corner of his mouth had a hint of black-bellied flavor. But, from what he said, he should be a defeated opponent. Upon hearing this, Zongjing Wenren, who was seated below, tightened his grip on the porcelain cup in his hand and turned to look at Elder Su Wu. Elder Su Wu narrowed his eyes and was about to speak. He heard Helian Vivian say, "Oh, then don't worry about it." Elder Su Wu could barely maintain the gentleness on his face. What did he mean by "don't worry about it"? Was this woman looking down on the crown prince, or was she looking down on the Xianyuan Kingdom? Lord Chen was afraid that the two sides would quarrel again like they had with the Huangzi Kingdom. After all, the Xianyuan Kingdom was different from the other two neighboring countries. Their yin-yang exorcism technique was renowned throughout the world, and they could not be easily offended. Hence, he hurriedly said, "Elder Su Wu, I heard that on the day the princess was born, the light of Buddha descended from the heavens, and thousands of beasts roared in unison. Even the drought-stricken lands were nourished by holy water from the heavens. The princess herself is as beautiful as a fairy and is fated with Buddha. On the day the Xianyuan Kingdom entered the capital, the informants in the capital had spotted a young girl in the midst of the entourage. Furthermore, the Xianyuan Kingdom's princess had a crush on Beligaju, and all the officials had heard of it. With a little deduction, they knew that the Xianyuan princess had followed them here. Lord Chen's question was also intended to give the Xianyuan Kingdom a way out so that they could invite the princess to meet them. Elder Su Wu naturally accepted this and laughed heartily. "I didn't expect the princess's name to have spread to the War Dragon dynasty. Kanju, go and invite the princess over." Yes. If one did not look closely, the girl named Kanju would have thought that she was a teenager because she was also wearing an exorcist white robe. Before she left, she glanced in the direction of Helian Vivian, and her eyes were full of meaning. The little one understood the meaning behind her gaze and leaned over to Helian Vivian and whispered into her ear, "Third sister-in-law, I'm really not the one to cause trouble. That woman just now was looking down on you on behalf of her princess." Helian Vivian lowered her head and smiled. She tapped the little one with her finger and fed him a piece of date cake. She asked, "Who's more handsome, you or that crown prince?" "Of course third sister-in-law is more handsome." The little one held the date cake in his mouth and said firmly, "No one dares to court death in front of third brother. Third sister-in-law, you're the first." The corners of Helian Vivian's mouth twitched. Was this still considered a compliment? The little one stopped talking when he saw the jujube cake. He squatted beside Helian Weiwei's feet obediently with a pair of tiger-like eyes. He looked down and took a bite of the jujube cake. He was so adorable. Helene Vivian hugged him, but he did not get up. She said that squatting like this was domineering. As an ancient divine beast, he had to squat like this. Elder Suwu watched this scene and laughed coldly in his heart. He wondered how such a stupid third princess consort had managed to marry Beligaju. He said to Lord Chen, who was in the same camp as them, "The third princess consort is really naive." Lord Chen did not respond. He knew what Elder Suwu was talking about. The third princess consort was obviously rude to a foreign envoy. If it had been in the past, he would have agreed with Elder Suwu. But now, after witnessing how terrifying that woman's combat skills were, he did not dare to say anything. However, this time, he could start from another angle. He had received benefits from the Shenyuan kingdom and had said what he should say. He had kept the things that he should not say to himself. He would not meddle in the rest and would only help from the sidelines. It should not be too obvious. Lord Chen was deep in thought when he looked up and was met with a pair of eyes that made his scalp tingle. He did not know if it was an illusion, but when he met the gaze of the royal family, he felt that there was a cold red light in that pair of long, narrow eyes. Lord Chen shuddered in fear and took a step back. Elder Suwu helped him up and asked in confusion, "Lord Chen." Lord Chen finally regained his senses and exclaimed in surprise. He looked up at the seat of honor. The man's smile was languid and elegant, as if everything that had happened was just an illusion. Lord Chen heaved a sigh of relief. He had really scared himself. He had been in contact with the Shenyuan kingdom since the late emperor had just ascended the throne. Even the emperor had not noticed anything, so it was even more impossible for the third prince to notice anything strange. Moreover, the suggestion he was making now was all for the sake of the War Dragon dynasty. It was normal for the royal family to have political marriages. Lord Chen was deep in thought when he heard a loud announcement from outside the hall. "The Shenyuan princess has arrived." Chapter 646. In an instant, all the officials turned to look at the door and saw a slender lady slowly walking in. She was dressed in a white fox fur coat with flower-like sleeves. Her petite and perfect face was only the size of a palm. She looked like a budding magnolia flower. She was untainted from head to toe and exuded a kind of pure and graceful beauty. She was the kind of lady that all men would like. Perhaps it was the nature of men that made them like this kind of delicate and soft lady the most. "You greets the third prince." The lady's manner carried a Jiangnan vibe. Her gentleness did not lose its elegance. Many people were dumbfounded. When they heard the lady's voice, they gasped in amazement. Her voice was like a light drizzle that fell into their ears. The officials started to talk among themselves. Even the exorcists from the other two countries had their eyes fixed on Zongjing Yu'er. It was as if they were mesmerized by her beauty. Zongjing Yu'er smiled and lowered her head shyly. Her eyes never left the tall and outstanding figure sitting in the seat of honor. Lord Chen shook his head in amazement. Truly, seeing is believing. Princess Yu'er's celestial beauty is rare in the world. "You flatter me." Elder Suwu stood in front of Zongjing Yu'er and stroked his beard. The old-fashioned officials finally came to their senses. Seeing that the atmosphere was good, they could not help but try to guess the royal's thoughts from the perspective of a man. It had been some time since the royal family married a wife. Although the third princess consort was not bad, she looked a little too competitive. After seeing too many of such women, one would definitely need an understanding flower to ease one's mind. Princess Shenyuan was beautiful and had a good figure. Coupled with her girlish shyness, who would not be moved by her beauty? Some of the officials turned their eyes and came to life. They sighed and said, "His Highness has always served the country and the people. The princess looks gentle and attentive. They are a perfect match." Zongjing Yu'er listened from the side. Her face was full of shyness. She looked very pretty when she was quiet. Little Seven held the pastry in his mouth and looked around. To his surprise, Third Aunt did not react at all. Instead, she smiled lazily. There was an indescribable evil in her expression. The little one felt that it was time for him to say something. If he did not, those old men would really push that woman over. Third sister-in-law. The little one tugged at Helene Vivian's sleeve and said with a fierce expression, "Shouldn't we start now?" Helene Vivian rested her chin on her other hand and said with a smile, "Don't touch me. I'm a civilized person." Lord Chen couldn't hear the conversation between the elder and the child. Seeing that there wasn't much movement, he smiled and continued to follow the words of his colleague. "Indeed, they are a perfect match. If this matter can be settled, that would be great." Elder Suwu smiled politely. At this moment, Zongjing Yu'er tugged at his sleeve and looked at him. Elder Suwu understood what she meant and turned to look at Helene Vivian. Whether or not this matter will succeed will depend on whether the third princess consort understands the bigger picture. "Oh." Hellion Vivian was joking with the little one. When she heard someone mention her name, she raised her eyebrows lazily. Zongjingyuer did not want to make things too awkward. She knew that Hellion Vivian had a special feeling for that person, so she tugged at Elder Suwu's sleeve and said, "Elder sister, I haven't seen you for 5 years. I thought that you would marry into the Murong family. I didn't expect you to be in the palace." Hellion Vivian frowned when she heard this. Judging from the Shenyuan princess's words, it seemed that they knew each other. However, she did not have any memory of Shenyuan princess. Could it be that Zongjingyuer had met the original Hellion Vivian when she was searching for the soul fragment? "Elder sister, you should know that I've admired His Highness since I was a child. After so many years, I have never changed." When Zongjingyuer said this, her cheeks were pink and she looked very shy. When the exorcists heard this, they could not help but feel envious. They did not expect that there would be a woman who could publicly express her love for the third prince. How many lifetimes must it have taken for the third prince to have such good fortune? "I hope that elder sister will grant my wish." Zongjingyuer bit her thin lips and looked very pitiful. When the bystanders saw this, they could not help but feel their hearts soften. "Third Princess Consort, please accept Princess Yuer's wish." The envoy from Huangzi Nation had just been humiliated by Hellion Vivian. Now that he wanted to regain his dignity, he smiled warmly and said, "Third Princess Consort, do you have the heart to deny such a touching love?" Hellion Vivian glanced at the envoy and stood up slowly. With a flick of her fingers, she removed the hooded cloak on her head and threw it on her chair, revealing her stunning face. She was wearing an exorcist's robe underneath, but there was a white fur coat around her shoulders. She was absolutely gorgeous. She was tall and slender, and the corners of her mouth were curved. Her aura was fierce and outstanding. Just by raising her eyebrows, she could cause the surrounding people to gasp. Zongjinwenren's hand, which was holding the teacup, paused. It was as if there was only this figure left in his eyes. If Zongjingyuer's beauty was refreshing like water, Hellion Vivian's beauty was captivating and enchanting. At first glance, it was enough to leave an unforgettable impression. In addition to her voice and appearance, there was a languid and mischievous air that was different from other girls. One could not help but stare at her again and again until they lost their minds. It was not that Zongjinwenren had never seen Hellion Vivian before. Back then, she was still young and spoke softly. This time, when he looked at her again, her eyes were as bright as stars and she walked as if there was no one around. It was as if she was a completely different person. She was so dazzling that the entire magnificent hall became a foil to her. The emissary from Huangzi Nation did not expect Hellion Weiwei to grow up to be so beautiful. Even when they were talking just now, she was standing at a high vantage point and far away. Her hooded cloak covered her face, so he could only see her chin at most. Now that Hellion Weiwei had walked over, the closer she got, the more beautiful her breathtaking face became. The surroundings were so quiet that not a single sound could be heard. Even Zongjingyuer did not expect her to be so beautiful. She bit her thin lips and said, "Sister." Hellion Weiwei stopped in front of her and tilted her head slightly. She was not looking at her, but at Zongjinwenren who was sitting beside her. "Crown Prince, does everyone in the Shenyuan kingdom have this kind of hobby? Do you like to be someone's concubine?" As soon as she said this, Zongjinwenren, Zongjingyuer, and Elder Suwu's expressions were extremely ugly. Hellion Vivian smiled and continued, "Zongjingyuer, right? You want me to fulfill your wish? You even accused me of not knowing the bigger picture. Why? Before you fell for Beligaju, didn't you know that he was already married?" Chapter 647. Zongjingyuer was not afraid of her saying that. She was already prepared for this. With reddened eyes, she immediately straightened her back and refused to back down. "I like him. Even if he has you, I can still accept it. For him, I'm willing to do anything." Hearing this, everyone present was moved by the girl's deep feelings. It was indeed a lot for a princess to lower herself to such a level. Moreover, Zongjingyuer's eyes were already welling up with tears. Many men were touched and softened. Hellion Vivian glanced at the crowd and knew what they were thinking. She smiled coldly and said, "You want to talk about feelings with me? Among all the feelings in the world, there are those who are willing to sacrifice themselves to save others. There are those who are willing to spend thousands of years with a single glance. There are also those who are willing to sacrifice themselves to put out the fire. However, none of these feelings are destructive or intrusive. Zongjingyuer, since your brother won't teach you, let me, an outsider, teach you. What you did was not love. You did it because you wanted to establish a chastity. Haha, you said that even if Beligaju had me, you could still accept it. You ruined others' lives and still have the courage to brag about your thick skin. It's rare." Hellion Vivian's last sentence embarrassed Zongjingyuer. She was so angry that her lungs were about to explode. Her whole body was trembling as if she was being bullied. The exorcists of the Xianyuan dynasty immediately stood up and shouted, "Third Princess Consort, don't go too far." Helene Vivian smiled faintly and said, "Why? You're embarrassing yourself, and you won't let others talk about it?" "Princess Consort." Lord Chen was the closest to Helene Vivian. He said with a pleading tone, "His Highness hasn't said anything yet. Let's wait." Helene Vivian raised her eyebrows. She seemed to have changed her mind. She looked at him with a smile and said, "Lord Chen, you mean to let His Highness handle this matter?" The official surname Chen had been an official for many years and understood the mentality of this kind of concubine the best. It was obvious that she wanted to use the fact that she was favored to prevent His Highness from conferring concubines again. However, she did not consider that the other party was the princess of the Xianyuan kingdom. No matter what, His Highness had to consider the bigger picture. Even if he did not consider the bigger picture, Zongjing Yu'er was beautiful and had deep feelings for His Highness. Which man would not want her? When Lord Chen thought of this, he straightened his posture and said, "Of course, the royal family is in charge of such an important matter." Zongjing Wenren glanced at Helene Vivian before he shifted his gaze to Elder Su Wu. Elder Su Wu received the order and immediately smiled. He stepped forward and said loudly to Beligaju, "Your Highness, if Your Highness is willing to accept the marriage, I hope that Your Highness will show your attitude. I heard that Your Highness has been married for so long, but there has been no movement from the Princess Consort. If Your Highness likes such a woman, you can keep her. However, Princess Yu'er has been noble since she was young and has never served anyone. How can a princess be a concubine? It is better to leave this position for someone else." The little one frowned when he heard this. Did this old man mean that third sister-in-law should be a concubine? What a joke! Of course, once the royal family agrees, these exorcists will be under Your Highness' command. Elder Suwu was all smiles. He believed that Bailey Jiaju would not reject his offer. After all, the current War Dragon dynasty could not do without the help of the Xianyuan kingdom. When Helene Vivian heard this, she tilted her head and smiled. She twirled her long hair with her fingers, looking somewhat nonchalant. Zongjing Yu'er was originally very happy, but when she saw that smile, she felt very displeased. At the same time, she felt extremely embarrassed and angry. The light in his eyes couldn't help but sink. When he looked at Wei Wei, he brought out a cold intent. So what if she was his official wife? She was the princess of the Xianyuan kingdom, so she was naturally more noble than her. Furthermore, she had admired that person for a long time. Back then, he was still a teenager. She had only taken one look at him from afar and fell for him. All these years, she had been waiting for an opportunity. Now that the opportunity had come, she would not give it up no matter what. Furthermore, as long as she could get close to that person, she was confident that he would see the good in her. At this thought, Zongjing Yu'er lifted her head and looked at Beligaju with sparkling eyes. That person seemed to be walking towards her. Zongjing Yu'er's heart was beating wildly, and her face was flushed. She was thinking about how she should respond if he were to speak to her. Lord Chen, who was beside her, said with a smile, "It seems that His Highness has also fallen for the princess. Otherwise, based on his character, he would not have come here personally." Zongjing Yu'er became even more embarrassed when she heard this. She felt that all her efforts were worth it. Beligaju was indeed walking toward her. He was wearing a black robe with exquisite workmanship. Even the sleeves were lined with silver embroidery, outlining the auspicious clouds. Everything about him showed his innate elegance and nobility. He was holding another cape in his hand. As he walked past the officials, the hubbub of voices gradually died down. Regardless of whether it was the envoys from the various countries or the exorcists, all of them could feel the powerful aura that was inherent in this man. It was as if they would blaspheme the celestial being just by saying a few words. It was not a complete celestial aura. There was also a dark aura that flowed around him. When such an aura was placed on a person who was full of self-restraint, it would only make it harder for people to look away. 3. Royal family. Zongjing Yu'er's face was flushed red. Her voice was as sweet as melted candy. She raised her eyes and was about to meet Beligaju's eyes. There was a cracking sound. It was as if something had broken beside her ear. Then, there was a strong smell of blood. "Ah!" Lord Chen cried out in pain. He pressed on his broken right arm with his left hand. He was in so much pain that his forehead was dripping with cold sweat. Your Highness, why? What did I do wrong? Why are you treating a loyal subject of the imperial court like this?" Beligaju smiled. The wind blew at his long robe. It was a black cape with a raised collar made of silver fox fur. It complemented his handsome face and made him look even colder and more noble. He was like a noble who had been awakened from the darkness. His every move was filled with innate elegance, even if he did not look very approachable. A loyal subject of the imperial court? Do you think that I do not know that you accepted 1,000,000 taels of silver from the Shenyuan kingdom's envoy yesterday? What? Who would have thought that Lord Chen would? The officials started whispering to each other. Lord Chen was so frightened by his words that his face turned pale. Your Highness, please listen to my explanation, Your Highness. Yet Bailey Jiaju only took the white handkerchief and wiped the bloodstains on his fingers. He smiled devilishly and gracefully. You don't need to explain. I want to kill you, not because you took the money, but because you meddled in something you shouldn't have. Chapter 648. Swoosh. The white handkerchief was like a sharp knife that cut through his neck. Lord Chen's eyes widened in shock. Blood trickled down his hand. Lord Chen only touched it for a moment before he fell backward. His whole body was convulsing, and his throat was gurgling. Then, he tilted his head and stopped breathing. The shadow guards moved quickly. The moment Lord Chen fell, they dragged him away and cleaned up the bloodstains. They did not even blink during the entire process. The conservative ministers watched the scene with numbness in their scalps, and their hands started to tremble. His Highness had made his intentions clear. The only thing Lord Chen could interfere with was the marriage alliance. Lord Gu was also dragged away like this. Zongjing Yu'er was the closest to Lord Chen. The long dress that she had meticulously prepared was now stained with blood. She looked a little disheveled, but more than that, she was embarrassed. Her face was burning hot. Was he rejecting her? Beligaju took another step forward. He did not even look at the so-called princess. He grabbed the fur coat in his hand and covered Hellion Vivian's head with it. Then, he pulled her over with a cold expression. Who allowed you to show your face? Hellion Vivian tried to defend herself. This hat is blocking my view. Wear it even if it is blocking your view. Beligaju pressed down on the furry hair in front of him and looked in the direction of Zongjing Wenran with his deep eyes. The light in his eyes was so cold that it seemed to have frozen. Zongjing Wenran finally reacted. He had been staring at Hellion Vivian since the beginning. Zongjing Yu'er bit her thin lips and suddenly opened her mouth. Her soft voice was filled with persistence. Your Highness, no matter what decision you make, I want to tell you that I really like you. When Hellion Vivian heard this, she glanced at the man beside her and sighed in her heart. He was indeed a femme fatale. He had so many admirers. However, she was not afraid that he would waver. She would also find a few handsome men and see whose harem was stronger. Beligaju did not need to think to know what the little fox in front of him was thinking. He reached out and pinched her wrist. Using his strength, he lowered his voice and chuckled in her ear. With a warning tone, he said, if you dare to carry out the things in your mind, I will make you unable to even get out of bed. Hellion Vivian's back stiffened. Her small face was very sincere. I wasn't thinking about anything just now. Beligaju looked at her coldly as if he was looking at an idiot. He said slowly, I am now your guardian demon. Do you think that I can't detect your stream of consciousness? Hellion Vivian, fuck. This was already considered as spying on her privacy. In that case, would she not even be able to think of doing bad things in the future? How annoying. You can still do bad things. Bailey Jiaju lowered his head and kissed the corner of Wei Wei's mouth as if there was no one else present. He didn't care in the slightest that someone was looking at them. He lowered his voice and whispered in her ear, however, you can only do it to me. You can do whatever you want, my master. Hellion Vivian. Don't speak in such a childish tone. Bailey Jiaju laughed, as if he enjoyed seeing Hellion Wei Wei's angry expression. Even that pair of unfathomable eyes became much brighter. Zongjing Yu'er did not expect that her confession would be ignored just like that. That man had not even looked at her from the beginning to the end. Your Highness, why are you treating me like this? Am I wrong to like you? Zongjing Yu'er's tears gushed out. She looked very beautiful as she cried. This made the envoys and exorcists from the other countries feel a little sad. A woman like her should be doted on. Even if the War Dragon Empire's third prince was unwilling to marry her, he should not have embarrassed her like this. When Beligaju heard this, he glanced at Zongjing Yu'er. Zongjing Yu'er seemed to have seen hope. Her eyes were still filled with tears as she raised her head with reddened eyes. Bailey Jiaju smiled. His etiquette was so graceful that no one could pick out the slightest mistake. You ask me, where did you go wrong? I actually want to ask you, I don't like you, yet you insist on sticking in front of me, what's the meaning of this? Are the women of the Shenyuan kingdom so lacking in love? Why do you have to interfere in other people's families? When the little one heard this, he took a step back. He had thought that if third sister-in-law wanted to fight, he would join in the fun. But now, it seemed that third elder brother was going to flip out. It was better for him to stay away. When third elder brother was angry, it was definitely not something that ordinary people like him could accept. Take what he said just now as an example. Although it sounded nice, he only said one word throughout the whole process: despicable. How could the people in the main hall not understand? When Zongjingyuer heard what Beligaju said, her face turned green and white. Her body swayed as if she was going to fall on the spot. She was a princess. When had she ever been humiliated like this? What did he think of her as? Of course, Elder Suwu would not allow this to continue. Third Prince, I thought that your country is a country of etiquette, so you should understand. I have the same thoughts as you, Elder Suwu. Beligaju calmly interrupted him. His eyes were filled with coldness. As a country of etiquette, no country would send their princess out like a singer. Elder Suwu, why don't you ask official Wang of the Huangzi country if his country would do the same? Of course not. Official Wang immediately denied. This was a matter of national pride. The smile on Bailey Jiaju's face widened. He was full of evil intentions as he said, look, even the Huangzi nation would not do such a thing, but the Xianyuan nation did. I refused, and Elder Suwu still wants to talk about etiquette with me. Ha, Bailey Jiaju didn't say the rest of the words, but almost everyone in the audience understood. What he meant was that the Xianyuan kingdom didn't deserve it. Elder Suwu's face turned green. He clenched his fists and glared at official Wang, who had just spoken. Lord Wang finally realized that Bailey Jiaju was using him as a tool just now. Damn it. It was agreed that the three countries would work together to deal with the War Dragon dynasty. How did he end up helping Beligaju to deal with Elder Suwu? This man. Official Wang could not think of any adjectives to describe Beligaju. He was dumbfounded. Helian Weiwei silently learned from the experience at the side. Before she met His Highness, she thought that she was shameless enough. But after meeting His Highness, she realized what it meant to be an expert. To scold someone and even use an alliance's emissary as an excuse, it was really clever. No wonder His Highness always said that her methods were not ruthless enough. All she knew was to fight and kill. She did not know the ropes at all. Now, Helian Vivian finally understood what it meant to be ruthless. She looked at Elder Suwu and Emissary Wang's expressions, then at Naylan Yuer's. How humiliating it must be to not be able to scream in pain. Chapter 649. If that's the case, let's not waste any more time. Zongjingwenren stood up coldly and stared at Beligaju. Brother Beligaju, how do you plan to solve the seal? Once the divine exorcism seal is destroyed, not only the capital city, but the entire divine mainland will face the invasion of demons. Now that the envoys from the three countries are here, we have the ability to suppress the seal. You can do whatever you want if you refuse to let us settle in the capital city and reject the marriage alliance. However, this is a matter of great importance to the people of the world. We can't just do whatever you want. The War Dragon Empire has its own elder compound. Why don't we have a competition to see which country is better at yin and yang exorcism? The winner will guard the seal. When Wu Jing heard this, he said angrily, Crown Prince Wenren, who doesn't know that the Xianyuan kingdom is best at yin and yang exorcism? You're obviously doing this because you know we don't know how to exorcise demons. If you're so capable, let's have a martial qi competition. General. Zongjingwenren laughed sarcastically. The only way to deal with demons and resentful spirits is to use yin and yang exorcism. If you use martial qi to fight ghosts, you'll be the one who dies in the end. Wu Jing was speechless. He could only stare at Zongjingwenren, hating himself for not being able to use his strength. At this moment, the envoys from the other two countries spoke. Crown Prince Wenren is right. The royal family will compete fairly. The winner of 2 out of 3 rounds will guard the seal. While they were speaking, the exorcists behind them stood up and rotated their wrists. When they looked at Wu Jing, their eyes were filled with contempt. It was obvious that the other countries had come prepared. From the beginning, they had planned to use the competition as an excuse to send troops to the capital city. Everyone knew that the War Dragon Empire's elder compound had not recovered its power yet. It was impossible to find anyone who knew how to exorcise demons. The War Dragon Empire, which had the most say among the 4 countries, was now being suppressed by the other 3 countries. As a civil official, Lu Yu was anxious. Zongjingwenren raised his eyebrows and said slowly, Brother Bailey, don't tell me you don't agree to this. The exorcists laughed. It was obvious what they were laughing about. Your Highness. A representative from the elder compound stood up. It was a young man. His eyes were burning with anger and he said, I'll compete. I've learned the art of yin and yang. However, just by looking at his attire, one could tell that he was still a dabbler. The ministers all understood, and the young man who spoke also understood that he could not defeat the other party, but he could not let them come to his door and bully him. All right. Elder Suwu stroked his white beard and took a step forward. Since someone has agreed to participate in the competition, let's decide on the candidates and the rules of the competition. We need to confirm this as soon as possible. When the officials heard this, they all looked at Beligaju. If His Highness agreed to the marriage, it would not be so difficult. But none of them dared to say it out loud, for fear that they would be killed on the spot. However, they already had a plan in mind. When the retired emperor returned, they would definitely report this matter to him. Not only did the third Princess Consort's stomach not make a sound for so many months, but this time, His Highness even rejected the Xianyuan dynasty's marriage alliance because of her. They really didn't have the slightest bit of hope of winning this competition. At this thought, someone finally could not help but take a step forward and knelt on the ground loyally. He kowtowed heavily and said, "Your Highness, this old official has been an official for decades. On account of this old official's diligence and sincerity, this old official will only say one thing. The War Dragon dynasty has never been good at losing yin and yang. If we lose this competition, not only will we lose our reputation, but we will also lose the entire imperial city. This old official earnestly requests that Your Highness reconsider the marriage alliance with Princess Zongjing. This official also earnestly requests that Your Highness reconsider the marriage alliance with Princess Zongjing." Another person knelt down and kowtowed loudly on the ground. A smug smile appeared on Elder Suwu's face. These old officials were still the most sensible. From beginning to end, Bailey Jiaju had been standing tall and straight, the corners of his mouth hooked up into an arc. At this time, when he heard the two ministers kowtowing, a cold light flashed through his eyes. It looked like he was about to make a move. Hellion Vivian tugged at his fur cloak and shook it with her head. Beligaju narrowed his eyes, revealing his demonic nature. "Why are you stopping me? Didn't you hear what they were saying, I said before, I will do the killing." Hellion Vivian looked up and smiled. She held his hand. "Your hands are so beautiful, you can't always fight and kill. Furthermore, those two people are Imperial Grandfather's people. How are you going to explain to Imperial Grandfather if you kill them?" Beligaju lowered his head and smiled. "Wei, you seem to have forgotten." Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows. Beligaju said casually, "I am a demon. It is only right for demons to kill. However, since you don't like such a bloody way of handling things, then forget it. Killing people is a waste of energy. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have bothered to kill them. It is not worth dirtying my hands. It will take a long time to wash them." Hellion Vivian. "Those are humans, not flies or mosquitoes. Can you not speak so casually?" After Beligaju finished speaking, he let go of Hellion Vivian's waist and walked towards the two officials. His eyes were deep and his voice was cold. "Help these two officials up." "Yes." The Shadow Guard stepped forward in unison. The two officials thought that the imperial family had finally thought it through and their faces lit up with joy. Zongjing Yuer glanced at Hellion Vivian and said softly, "I know he likes you, but Hellion Vivian, you can't deny that if he marries me, I can solve all his problems. What about you? What can you do for him?" When Hellion Wei heard this sentence, her lips curved into a meaningful smile. Zongjing Yuer was enraged by her smile. She took a deep breath and said, "I don't want to make things too awkward. He will agree to marry me in a while. As long as you give up your position as the imperial concubine, I will guarantee that you will never." Before she could finish her sentence, Beligaju's voice was like ice on the ground. It filled the entire hall. "Don't you want to compete?" "Lord Qi, Lord Xie, just stand there and watch. Who says that the War Dragon dynasty will definitely lose?" Zongjing Yuer's face froze. She slowly turned her head and looked at Beligaju in disbelief. Even at this stage, he still refused to marry her. How could the War Dragon dynasty win in its current state? Zongjing Wenren's eyes turned cold. "Lang Yi, go easy on him in the first round. He is a beginner. Teach him what exorcism is." "Yes." Lang Yi, the exorcist, took a step forward. His face was full of disdain, as if he did not care about the young man at all. Chapter 650. The exorcists from the other two nations stepped forward as well. When they saw the young man sent by the War Dragon dynasty, they all sneered at him. "Look at what he's wearing. I don't think he knows how to bind spirits." "Haha, bind spirits? I think he might not even be able to detect where the ghost is." The exorcists laughed together. None of them were old, in their 20s, but the power they exuded was not to be underestimated. The power of an exorcist was determined by the robes they wore and the items they carried on their backs. The more complete the set, the more powerful they were. Since the three nations had decided to join forces, the exorcists they sent were not to be trifled with. They were certain that no one in the War Dragon dynasty could deal with them. They had gone too far. The young man could not ignore the resentment and anger in his heart. However, now that he had stepped forward, he did not know what to do. Moreover, he could clearly feel how powerful the exorcists from the Xianyuan kingdom were. They carried dual swords, carried talismans, and even had spirit-binding ropes around their waists. The Xianyuan kingdom did not send their most powerful exorcists because the situation before them did not require their help. They were more than enough to deal with it. It would be a lie to say that he was not afraid. The young man was indeed a beginner. He had only seen what ghosts looked like when he was with the elders. Now that he was facing a real battle, he was not confident. However, he had to give it a try. The first round, spirit binding. This is the first step of exorcism. If you can't even complete this step, there's no need to mention protecting the divine exorcism seal, Elder Suwu said as he glanced in the direction of the Battle Dragon dynasty. In all fairness, Luyu was anxious. He was really worried for the royal family. If this decision was not done well, the consequences would be unimaginable. The two old officials who persuaded Beligaju to marry seemed to have predicted the outcome. They shook their heads and sighed. Spirit binding, to put it bluntly, was to bind the spirits in place and control them, preventing them from harming others. It will be completed in half an incense stick's worth of time. In order to avoid any accidents, if anyone fails to restrain the vengeful ghost, this old man will personally take care of it. So, everyone, there is no need to worry about anything happening. As Elder Suwu spoke, he took out a cosmos sack from his robes. This is the soul of a wild ghost who has been dead for less than half a year. We met her on our way here. She died in an accident and was affected by resentment. She is looking for a substitute everywhere. If we don't solve this problem soon, she will become a ferocious evil spirit in less than 3 months. What you need to do now is to restrain her, and the one who takes the least amount of time wins. That's it? Isn't it too simple? Lang Yi from the Xianyuan kingdom curled his lips in disdain. Elder Suwu stroked his white beard and smiled. To take care of the beginners, I don't want people to say that the Xianyuan kingdom is bullying others just because we are exorcists. All right. Lang Yi shrugged. Elder Suwu turned his face to the side and continued, the 4 of you will form a circle and stand at the 4 corners of the circle. You should know that once a ghost is released, it will try its best to escape. When the time comes, whoever the female ghost runs to will be the one to restrain her. Do you understand? Understood. The exorcists from the 3 kingdoms answered firmly. Although the young man's face was pale, he still spoke up, albeit with a lack of confidence. Elder Suwu did not need to look to know that they would definitely win this round. The young man's panic was obvious. When the female ghost was released later, he might be so scared that he would not even dare to move. All right, since everyone understands, let's begin. Elder Suwu reached out and placed the cosmos sack in the middle of the circle. After a while, the originally bulging cosmos sack began to rumble. Then, a strand of black hair crawled out from within. The black hair was dense and frightening. Then came the eyes, the bridge of the nose, and the mouth. As if she had finally found the exit, the female ghost quickly crawled out. If it were not for the fact that there were so many people around, the ministers would have run away. The scene in front of them was too frightening. The female ghost looked as if she had been crushed by something. First, she turned her head, then with those hollow eyes, she stared in one direction and rushed over. Lang Yi spoke eloquently. Then, he pointed his fingers and said, "Freeze." The female ghost seemed to have been blocked. Knowing that she could not escape from this place, she bared her teeth and suddenly rushed back. The exorcists from Huangzi Kingdom did not expect the Yin energy on her body to be so strong. They almost lost control, but in the end, they managed to bind the female ghost to the spot. The ministers watched from the side with trembling hands. After all, once the female ghost rushed out, she would possess a human body. Once possessed, it would be easy to subdue her. Ghosts were different from humans, especially ghosts who had been dead for less than half a year. They relied on the breathing of humans to identify their location. Obviously, the female ghost was smart. After trying twice, she accurately sniffed out the location where the breathing was the heaviest and the defense was the weakest. She took 2 steps back, turned her head, and then twisted her body again. She looked in the direction of the young man, her eyes overflowing with thick black fog. Oh no! She's turning into a malicious spirit. Luyu watched from the periphery and could not help but stand up. Elder Suwu lowered his voice and said, "Calm down. She's just resentful because she couldn't break out of the encirclement. She hasn't reached the stage of becoming a malicious spirit yet." Luyu was still worried and looked at the young man. Not only was the young man's forehead covered in sweat, but his back was also wet. He repeated the incantation that Lang Yi and the others had seen just now. However, the female ghost was completely unaffected. She was only afraid at the beginning, but after tasting the sweetness, she suddenly rushed over and was about to bite the young man. A figure flashed in front of them. When the crowd regained their senses, Helian Weiwei had already dragged the young man to the side. Her hooded cloak covered her face, revealing only a pair of starry eyes. She looked down at the female ghost with an eerie aura. She did not recite the incantation. She only said 2 words, "Go back." Her voice was neither soft nor loud. The female ghost laughed sinisterly, as if she was mocking this human stupidity. Her eyes were bloodshot as she reached out her black fingers and grabbed at Helian Vivian. "You're a woman too. You can be my substitute. Ha 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 ha." When the crowd saw this, they thought that it was over. The third princess consort was definitely going to die. However, what no one expected was that Helian Weiwei actually stood there, her eyes sparkling, not moving at all, as if 10,000 ghosts couldn't invade her, as if she held the wind and clouds of the world in her palm. Her thin lips slightly opened, her fingertips emitting light, faintly able to hear her chanting, "Lin, Bing, Do, Jie, Jia, Zhen, Lai, in front." Chapter 651. Before Helian Vivian could finish chanting the incantation, the female ghost seemed to have been frightened. She took a few steps back and stared at Helian Vivian with wide eyes. She didn't dare to go forward and half bent her knees as if she was begging for mercy. Humans couldn't understand the ghost language and could only hear the heavy breathing. However, looking at the female ghost's posture, it could be seen that she was very afraid of Helian Vivian. This scene was completely out of everyone's expectations. Not only were the people from the War Dragon Empire shocked, even the exorcist named Lang Yi who was standing beside Helian Vivian was so shocked that he couldn't say a word. If he didn't hear wrongly, the incantation that the other party was chanting was the 9 syllables mantra. How could the War Dragon Empire's third princess consort know the most authentic Tao of exorcism? Exorcism. Following Helian Vivian's last 2 words, the female ghost collapsed onto the ground. The female ghost's body bent forward and her entire body collapsed to the ground. Feeling the pain from her internal organs, she didn't dare to reach out her hand again. Everyone could see that if Lang Yi and the others could restrain the female ghost, then Helian Vivian could make the female ghost afraid. She was so afraid that she didn't dare to move in the slightest. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Helian Weiwei walked toward the female ghost. "Don't come into close contact with her. Be careful of being possessed by her ghost." As if he was subdued by Helian Vivian's Tao, Lang Yi reminded her as cold sweat broke out on his forehead. However, Helian Vivian didn't stop. Her hooded cloak fluttered in the wind, looking free and easy. Looking at the female ghost, she still only said 2 words, but they seemed to carry the aura of sweeping away 1,000 soldiers. "Go back." The female ghost didn't say anything. Looking left and right, she turned around and went back into the Qianquan pouch. Her speed was shockingly fast, even more anxious than when she came out. It was as if Helian Vivian was some kind of scourge. To be able to force a ghost to this extent, they really hadn't seen it before. Everyone turned back to look at Helian Vivian. Their faces were full of shock and amazement. Wu Jing was a boorish man. He laughed happily on the spot and said, "Third princess consort, I didn't expect you to know how to exorcise demons." Helian Vivian smiled. She had come into contact with Yuan Shao before, oh no, before His Highness had completely awakened. When that female ghost appeared, it was basically a natural reaction. But what made her feel strange was that she could actually understand what the female ghost was saying. What the fuck is this? In the future, when she wanted to steal things at night, would there be countless ghosts whispering behind her and she would be able to hear them? It all depends on whether you like it or not. If you don't want to hear it, you won't hear it. A familiar low voice sounded. It was the voice of a certain highness, and it even carried a mocking sneer. Helian Vivian glanced at the seat of honor and peeked at her thoughts again. "Can't you give me some personal space?" Elder Su Wu didn't expect things to turn out this way at all. His expression turned serious. Even the exorcists from the other neighboring countries had frozen expressions on their faces. The War Dragon Empire's elder compound had been severely damaged. They were not proficient in exorcism, so they were definitely weak in this aspect. It was because they had expected this that they decided to join forces with the 3 countries and come to the capital. But now, someone had actually recited the 9 symbolic words. And judging by the female ghost's reaction, this person's recitation of the 9 symbolic words seemed to be very powerful. Because even they couldn't guarantee that the female ghost would be so fearful. It was as if there was something more evil than her here. There was indeed someone more evil than her here. Beligaju, who was sitting on the seat of honor. His face still carried a faint smile of elegance. Just behind Helly and Vivian, when no one was looking, a dangerous golden light slowly appeared in his dark eyes. It was also at that moment that the female ghost felt an aura that humans couldn't sense. She burrowed into the Qianquan bag and didn't dare to come out again. Of course, the female ghost wasn't sure what that aura was, but the fear that came from the depths of her bloodline told her to obey. No matter what, it looked like Helly and Vivian had won. But at this moment, Great Master Su Wu opened his mouth and asked, "Who took the least time?" In other words, he was saying that the rule was that the one who took the least time would win. It was obvious that Leng Yi from the Xianyuan kingdom had the advantage in this aspect. On the War Dragon Empire side, the young man himself had already spent a lot of time resisting the female ghost. In addition, Helly and Vivian had saved the situation. "I'm sorry." The young man lowered his head and clenched his fists. Helly and Vivian smiled mischievously. "It's fine. This is just the first round. You can leave now. I'll take the rest of the competition." "Is the War Dragon Empire planning to change the contestant?" Elder Su Wu smiled amiably. His gaze paused on Helly and Vivian for a moment before he said provocatively, "Third Princess Consort, you don't think that all exorcists in the Xianyuan kingdom are of this standard, do you?" Helly and Vivian smiled, showing her white teeth in a dashing manner. "The War Dragon Empire isn't as simple as you think. Just now, your princess asked me if I could give anything to His Highness. I thought about it carefully. Other than giving him money to support him, I can also help him slap people's faces. For example, your country is a bully. You." For the first time in his life, Elder Su Wu wanted to strangle someone to death. Helly and Vivian smiled faintly, as if she hadn't said those words. "Elder Su Wu, don't be so agitated. You're an elder." Elder Su Wu took a deep breath. Zhong Jingyuer's little face was so angry that it looked like blood was about to drip out of it. Little Seven chewed on the meat bun and looked left and right. Then, he scratched his head. Shouldn't the main point be other than giving him money to support him? Why was the other party so angry? Shouldn't third brother be the one who should be angry? At that thought, the little one stole a glance at his third brother. As expected. Beligaju raised an eyebrow and ran his finger across his thin lips. He laughed evilly. "Give me money to support me, heh. Third brother." The little one squatted down and said seriously, "Third sister-in-law was just saying that casually." Beligaju glanced at him, then reached out and patted the little one's head. He had a mischievous expression on his face. "She can say that casually. How do you think I should punish her? Hearing that, the little one immediately stopped talking. He lowered his bald head and looked at Helly and Vivian. He thought to himself, "Third sister-in-law, I've tried my best. Unfortunately, the enemy is too cunning." Helly and Vivian noticed the little one's gaze and glanced in his direction. She saw His Highness's half-smile and felt inexplicably scared. She began to communicate with the little one through her eyes. "What's going on?" The little one began to look up at the ceiling and moved his mouth behind him. Chapter 652. While Helly and Vivian was in a daze, the exorcists from the other two countries had already changed. The War Dragon Empire lost the first round. However, compared to the beginning, the officials no longer looked dispirited. Instead, hope was ignited in their hearts. Even the two old officials who had knelt down to ask Beligaju for a marriage alliance had changed their expressions. Everyone's gaze fell on Helly and Vivian. "Heh!" Someone chuckled. One of the exorcists sitting on the Xianyuan kingdom's side lifted his fur robe and stood up from his wooden chair. His facial features were firm and cold. "You only recited the 9 syllables mantra and you look down on our Xianyuan kingdom. Third Princess Consort, it's too early to boast. Don't forget, you've already lost a round." As soon as that person finished speaking, someone exclaimed, "Look at the sword on his back. Red peach wood? What's wrong with that?" The officials were confused. The youth lowered his head and muttered, "The color of the peach wood sword represents the exorcism ability of the Yin-Yang master. The redder the color, the more ghosts he has dealt with. After reaching a certain number, he can summon reapers." This person's appearance made the youth's previous misgivings become a reality. The spiritual aura of the cultivator was hard to ignore. The officials didn't know what was wrong with them. In front of this person, even breathing became difficult. His eyes seemed to be able to see through their lifespan and life. The situation seemed to be getting worse. Furthermore, he can summon reapers? Was there such a person in this world? The young man nodded solemnly. "This is a very high-level exorcism spell. I've only seen the elder use it once, and I've never seen it again. The elder once said that if one isn't a very powerful exorcist and can't control the messenger of death, they will be directly suppressed to hell by the messenger of death, never to return to the human world. To protect the divine exorcism seal, we don't need to summon reapers, right? The officials asked nervously. The youth thought for a moment and said, some resentful spirits must be brought to hell by reapers. They can't be destroyed directly. The remaining resentment will still affect the seal. Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows. So this round of the competition was to summon a ghost? The commonly known as Oxhead and Horseface? She had never seen such a thing before. And, how do I summon it? I haven't had time to learn the spell yet. You can say anything you want. The familiar voice rang in her ears again. His Highness's voice was slow and deep. Hellion Vivian said lazily, then I'll say something cool. Cool? Dazzling? His Highness simply couldn't understand this word. Hellion Vivian smiled and said, for example, come out when you die. They were all ghosts anyway. She didn't expect that as soon as she finished speaking, a small earth god would appear. Others couldn't see it, only she could see it. The small earth god was still carrying a piece of osmanthus cake on his back. After hearing Hellion Vivian's words, he immediately stopped and politely bowed to Hellion Vivian. This little god greets the great immortal and the king. The king was speaking to Beligaju, who was behind Hellion Vivian. Hellion Vivian cleared her throat. You are? Earth god, earth ghost. Beligaju's voice was indifferent. Because I'm often worshipped, I became a god. When the small earth god heard Beligaju's words, he was so scared that he trembled. What orders does the king and great immortal have? Hellion Vivian couldn't bear to see such a kind-hearted little old man trembling there, so she said in a low voice, it's okay, you can go back? Yes. The small earth god was relieved, and he jumped into the ground and disappeared. Hellion Vivian smiled and said, Your Highness, how unlikable are you? Other than being unlikable, I also hold grudges. Beligaju changed his position and said slowly, why don't we try it tonight? Hellion Vivian was speechless. When Elder Suwu saw Hellion Vivian looking down at the ground and not saying anything after so long, he smiled and said, what's the matter? Is the third princess consort thinking of changing her mind and sending someone else? Elder Zongjingyuer said softly, it's not strange for the third princess consort to have such thoughts. After all, she's summoning a ghost constable. If she doesn't control it well, her soul will be taken away. The constables don't have good tempers. Oxhead and Horseface were indeed bad-tempered. They were ghosts to begin with, so they carried the aura of death around them. Not to mention ordinary people, even Yin-Yang masters would avoid them when they saw them. Firstly, they were afraid of losing their lifespan, and secondly, they were afraid that the constables would change. The constables were much scarier than ordinary ghosts. As long as one looked into their eyes, death was certain. Logically speaking, the constables could not be interrupted when they brought their soul into the netherworld. However, if they wanted to summon a ghost constable, they had to do it at this time. Therefore, they had to be precise in their timing. Otherwise, when the ghost constables found out that their soul was being summoned to a place for no reason, they would only have one thought left in their mind. And that was to kill them. Whenever a ghost constables went to the mortal world, they had to bring their soul to the netherworld. This was the rule. It was the same principle as the king of hell wanting someone to die at midnight. He would never let them live until midnight. Therefore, Yin-Yang masters needed to be able to summon and send the ghost constables away. Yellow talismans were essential to any exorcist. Using blood to create a talisman, one could cast a spell and make the talisman appear in the form of a vengeful spirit. This was to achieve the effect of deceiving the ghost constables. Once there was a problem, the ghost constables would immediately transform. When that happened, one could only imagine what would happen to the caster. After hearing Elder Suwu and Zongjingyuer's words, the young man became even more worried. He looked at Hellion Vivian and said, Third Princess Consort, let me go. Although his spell was not good, he was an exorcist of the War Dragon Empire. He had to protect his master. This was the basic duty of a subject. Hellion Vivian looked at him again. Seeing that he was still young, she reached out and rubbed his head. Don't worry, I can handle it. Hearing this, Zongjingyuer spoke again in a gentle manner, I'm afraid the third princess consort is underestimating the summoning of the ghost constables. Bing Xian, if anything happens to the third princess consort, you must save her. Do you understand? At first glance, this sentence sounded like she was concerned about Hellion Vivian. However, at this moment, it sounded like she was certain that Hellion Vivian would lose. The exorcist named Bing Xian let out a long sigh. Princess, you are still so kind. However, some people might not appreciate it. As he spoke, Bing Xian glanced at Hellion Vivian. Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows. These two people were echoing each other as if they had already won. How interesting. The people of the Xianyuan dynasty have always been so. Helene Vivian seemed to be thinking of an adjective, but after a long time, she could not come up with a more elegant one. Then, she heard Beligaju slowly say 8 words. Chapter 653. You are good at imagining things. His tone was not harsh at all, but it was lethal. Most importantly, it did not spoil his elegance. However, it made Zongjingyu Air and Xianbing's faces turn livid in an instant. Obviously, His Highness's double entendre was very effective. Apart from talking about Xianbing, he was also talking about how Zongjingyu Air insisted on marrying him. In short, it could be summed up in one word: despicable. Once again, the crowd understood the meaning of his words. They looked at each other. Suddenly, they felt that Beligaju was invincible even if he did not use his martial arts. Moreover, they could not refute him. Xianbing clenched his fists and looked at Zongjingyu Air, who was about to cry. His chest heaved up and down, and he gritted his teeth, but he could not say anything. Helene Vivian felt that she must bring the royal guards with her when she was out. She could not be bullied. She had angered the other party before they even started the fight. We will know whether it is a fantasy or not in a moment. Zongjingwenren sneered. Xianbing, since the third princess consort does not need to give in, you should show her what a real exorcist is. Yes. Xianbing stood sideways, exuding a sharp spiritual aura. He glanced at Helene Weiwei with a confident look. Helene Vivian stood in her position according to the rules. No one could see her expression from the side of her face. Bailey Jiaju held the teacup in his hand. His fingers were slender and lustrous. His fingernails were pink and translucent. They glowed faintly like pearls. A black ring was clasped on his pinky finger. The ring seemed to be made of jade. The ministers were still worried. They looked at Helene Vivian and whispered, "Do you think the third princess consort can do it?" "I don't know." They did not know. That was a ghost summoner. Who would dare to do such a thing? Only the young man's face was pale. "The princess consort doesn't even stand properly." "What do you mean?" The ministers were confused again. The young man clenched his fists. "I once saw the elder summoning the reapers. He held a talisman in his left hand and a sword in his right hand. He chanted the incantation to summon the reapers, but the princess consort, Helene Vivian, did not take the yellow talisman at all. She stood there, her empty sleeves fluttering in the wind. Seeing this, Xianbing sneered and said, "Third princess consort, you didn't even know how to do it. Do you need me to teach you?" The other exorcists laughed when they heard what Xianbing said. Helene Vivian's eyes were indifferent. "He's a guest from afar, so I have to give him some leeway. I won't use the yellow talisman." Hearing this, Xianbing laughed even more mockingly. "I've never heard of anyone who can summon a ghost without using a yellow talisman. Third princess consort, you're so nice to hear." "It's more than nice to hear. You're exaggerating too much." The exorcist from Huangzi Kingdom looked at Helene Vivian with disdain. "You're just reciting the mantra of 9 syllables. You really think you're so important?" The young man was anxious. Why didn't the princess consort use the yellow talisman? Must she use the yellow talisman? Most of the ministers did not know the art of yin and yang, but they knew how useful the yellow talisman was just by listening to the conversation. The young man was so anxious that his tone changed. "Of course. The yellow talisman can not only summon the reapers, but also send them away. Without the yellow talisman, the reapers will be difficult to control." Elder Suwu laughed and said sarcastically, "The third princess consort is really brave." Hearing this, Wu Jing suddenly stood up. "Your Highness, should we replace the princess consort? Even if we're going to die, it should be us men. Why should we let a woman stand in front of us?" As Wu Jing said this, he glanced at the old ministers who only knew how to make sarcastic remarks and clenched his fists. Elder Suwu and Zongjingwenren smiled when they saw this. Now that they knew how powerful they were, why did they not do it earlier? However, what they did not expect was that Beligaju said calmly, "She hasn't been out of the palace all this time. Her claws have been itching for a long time. Now that someone is here, let her have some fun." Elder Suwu and Zongjingwenren were speechless. What did he mean by have some fun? They were humans, not cats and dogs by the roadside. Nor were they punching bags for training. Wu Jing didn't expect that his master would say such a thing. He was stunned and turned around to look at him. Indeed, not only the people from the Xianyuan kingdom, but even the envoys from the other 2 neighboring countries were flushed with anger. It was obvious that they were furious. The envoys all stood up and shouted at the exorcists who were preparing to summon the reapers, "You must win." They wanted to see who was the one playing with whom. The exorcists stood in their respective positions, not knowing what was going on. The smart Hellion Vivian saw the smile on His Highness' face and knew that he must have said something that angered both men and gods. Sigh, with such a sharp-tongued husband, she must be good at fighting. Hellion Weiwei felt that it was like killing a boss in an online game. She was slashing and slashing with all her might, while a certain highness was leisurely following behind her and enjoying himself. From time to time, he would draw aggro for her and so on. Forget it, who asked her to be a domineering president? She should be the one to do all the fighting and killing. His Highness was so beautiful, it was better to use his looks to defeat people. She was responsible for overturning the world while he was in charge of his beauty. A clear division of labor. That was good. At that thought, Hellion Vivian felt her entire body brimming with energy. After all, being able to let her other half enjoy himself was one of the essential skills of a domineering president. How could she not be excited? Hei's was not here now, but if he heard Hellion Vivian's thoughts, he would definitely vomit blood and die. His silly little sister had not figured out her position until now. This was too much. Oh no. Heart. What kind of empress was the woman responsible for overturning the world while the man was in charge of his beauty? Unfortunately, Hellion Vivian did not hear Hei's inner thoughts. Now, from right to left, you will summon one by one. The rules are the same as before. Whoever uses the least amount of time wins. Elder Suwu announced the rules of the competition, his voice still mocking, but I must remind you that if something goes wrong this time, it will not be so easy to settle. If some people are not strong enough, it's better not to push themselves too hard. Everyone knew who Elder Suwu's words were directed at. They all turned to look at Hellion Vivian. Their eyes were filled with worry and mockery. Chapter 654. Zongjing Yuer laughed coldly in her heart. Since you don't know what's good for you, I'll let Xian Bing send you on your way. Zongjing Yuer believed that Xian Bing would have his own plans even if she did not say anything. After all, he would not allow anyone to humiliate him like this. Sure enough, Xian Bing's eyes darkened. His mouth moved as if he was chanting something. Whitey, who had been staying in the fantasy space, heard the commotion. Her cold voice rang in Hellion Vivian's ears. Vivian, listen carefully to the exorcist next to you. What is he chanting? Is it a spell? I think so. Hellion Vivian communicated with her guardian beast using her consciousness. A light flashed in her eyes. If you didn't remind me, I wouldn't have heard it. His spell is quite strange. Whitey's voice deepened. He started chanting before the competition. Things are not as simple as they seem. You have to be careful. Okay. Hellion Vivian narrowed her eyes. The first exorcist in line was the gigolo from Huangzi Nation. He had already started chanting. First, he used his peachwood sword to draw a few lines on the ground. Then, he held the yellow talisman in his hand and started chanting. The moment he picked up the yellow talisman, the atmosphere in the hall changed. An indescribable chill came from all directions. Everyone could feel the bone-piercing chill on their backs. It was an indescribable feeling. It was as if they had sensed someone behind them, but when they turned around, there was no one there. The entire hall seemed to have lost its vitality. They could vaguely hear something. It sounded like the wind, but it also sounded like someone was panting. The sound was getting louder and louder. The gigolo's forehead was covered in sweat. He could not figure out what was going on. He paced around in circles. How could this be? What happened? The other exorcist from the neighboring country was the closest to him. As soon as he leaned over, his expression changed. This is, the gigolo's lips were pale and trembling. 2 reapers? Don't worry. You can take your time. Although he was comforting the gigolo, the exorcist took a step back. 1 reaper was hard enough to deal with. If there were 2 reapers and one was sent away, what would happen to the other? Thinking of this, he couldn't help but feel a little scared. At first, no one knew what was going on. As the air around them grew colder and colder, even the lights dimmed. Only then did people see 2 shadows. Accompanied by the sound of chains, they walked towards the gigolo with expressionless faces. There was not a trace of blood on their faces. A pair of dead eyes gloomily looked at everything around them. They were even more terrifying than the female ghost from before. The question was, why were there 2 of them? The gigolo's hand that was holding the yellow talisman began to tremble. The 2 reapers had already arrived by his side. They stood on his left and right, as if they were sniffing something. Hellion Vivian narrowed her eyes and said, "Throw the yellow talisman into the fire." Ghosts were afraid of fire, and the yellow talisman was used to guide the reapers. Wherever the yellow talisman was, the reapers would follow. When they encountered fire, they would naturally retreat. This was a general reasoning. However, the gigolo did not believe Hellion Vivian's words. What kind of joke was this? Throw away the yellow talisman? That was the only thing that could save his life. At this moment, Xianbing also spoke. Her voice was filled with confidence. Brother Mu Bai, don't listen to her. If you throw away the yellow talisman, you will lose the competition. Hold on for a while longer. The Reapers cannot stay in the human world for too long. When the time is up, they will leave. As long as the yellow talisman is still in your hand, you will be fine. Hearing Xianbing's words, the gigolo nodded heavily and used another part of his spiritual power. Helian Vivian saw that he did not seem to want to listen to her. She turned her head and said to the little one who was squatting by her feet, Xiao Qi, stay away from here. In less than half a minute, the two Reapers will realize that what they smell is not a ghost but a yellow talisman. Did she really think that the Reapers were idiots? Did she not see that the Reapers' eyes were different? What will happen if the Reapers realize that it is a yellow talisman? Wu Jing did not understand the rules at all. Lu Yu scolded him for being stupid and said, Reapers, they come to the human world to take souls. If they find that what they are taking is not a soul but a yellow talisman, they will directly take away the caster's soul. The gigolo listened to the sounds coming from the surroundings. More and more cold sweat appeared on his forehead. Xianbing snorted and turned his head to Helian Vivian. Third Princess Consort, you better not be an alarmist. I have summoned Reapers dozens of times. As long as I have the yellow talisman in my hand, I will be able to buy some time. You summoned one Reaper. Now there are two. How can one yellow talisman fool two Reapers? Helian Vivian spoke slowly, almost hitting the nail on the head. Xianbing froze at that moment. But soon, he said coldly, it is impossible to talk to someone who does not know how to exorcise. He was confident that as long as he could buy some time, the Reapers would leave. The gigolo exorcist had the same idea. He lowered his voice, Brother Xianbing, don't talk to her anymore. Help me see how much time I have left. What a fool. The little one held a meat bun in his mouth. There was disdain in his eyes. Third sister-in-law, since he doesn't listen to you and listens to others, let him die. Anyway, as the host, the War Dragon country has done what we should do. He is too arrogant and wants to die. Whoosh. As soon as the little one finished speaking, a gust of chilly wind blew around them. The Reapers, who were sniffing on the exorcist's right side, suddenly raised their eyes. They looked at the yellow talisman in front of them and tore it into pieces. Then, they grinned. The Reapers revealed their fangs. They did not know when a scythe appeared in their hands. Only then did the gigolo realize that Helian Vivian was right. He opened his eyes wide in fear and began to ask Helian Vivian for help. Helian Vivian had no intention to help at all. Just like what Xiao Qi said, she had done her duty as the host. Moreover, this person had been mocking them since the beginning. He brought this upon himself. Help, whoosh. If you stop the Reapers from reaping the soul, you have to pay with your head. This was the rule. The sound of the scythe beheading echoed throughout the hall. Some of the ministers were paralyzed with fear. Even the other exorcist felt his scalp go numb. Helian Wei stood in the middle, looking at this scene with an indifferent expression. All of this happened too quickly. It happened so fast that Xianbing did not have time to react. The two Reapers had already disappeared into the thick black fog with Mu Bai's head. After the Reapers left, the hall returned to its original gentleness. Only Mu Bai's cold corpse reminded them of what had just happened. The little one had long found the other party an eyesore. He walked over with a meat bun in his mouth. He looked fierce and said to the arrogant Xianbing seriously, someone listened to your suggestion and died. Are you sure that the Xianyuan kingdom is good at exorcism? Isn't it used to harm people? Chapter 655. They were being questioned by a child. The people of the Xianyuan kingdom felt like they had been utterly humiliated. Especially when everyone was looking at Xianbing, their eyes were filled with suspicion. Xianbing's face was flushed red as he waved his arms to defend himself. It's because he didn't have enough mana and didn't control the yellow talisman well enough. That's why the Reaper suddenly changed. The exorcists of the Huangzi kingdom obviously wouldn't accept such an explanation. Two of them stood up. What did you say? These young men were all hot-blooded, especially when it came to fighting for the glory of their kingdom. Ambassador Wang tried his best to keep the matter under wraps. He lowered his voice and said, don't be rash. We're now allies with the Xianyuan kingdom. The two exorcists clenched their fists and turned their heads away angrily. Xianbing didn't say anything else. After all, a life had been lost. The atmosphere in the hall was no longer as relaxed as it had been at the beginning. Next, it was time for another exorcist from the neighboring country to summon the Reaper. But from his expression, it was obvious that he was scared out of his wits. His face was pale and his forehead was sweating profusely. It seemed that he hadn't recovered since the beginning. After all, he was the closest to Mu Bai and could see the scene more clearly than anyone else. When the Reaper walked in, he could feel the cold wind around him. It could also remind him of some bad memories. For example, he had framed his senior in order to get his master's exorcist sword. At that moment, he thought that his senior had returned. No, I can't do it. It's too scary. I can't do it. The exorcist from the neighboring country suddenly shouted. Elder Su Wu glanced at him and said, forfeiting the competition means losing. Have you thought it through? Or do you have someone in your country who can take his place? No one responded. Everyone looked at each other and shook their heads in the end. That scene just now was too scary. If it was just one Reaper, they could still handle it. But 2 Reapers were too scary. If that's the case, then the next one, Xian Bing. Elder Su Wu looked towards the center of the Great Hall and pointed out, it's time to show everyone what you've got. Otherwise, some people will really think that they're right. Xian Bing took a step forward and glanced at Helian Weiwei with a cold smile. Elder is right. Some people don't know anything and only know how to order people around. If I don't do anything, I will become a joke in front of others. Previously, Brother Mu Bai failed to control the 2 Reapers that he summoned. This time, I will summon 4. Let's see who's right. What? 4 Reapers? Can it be summoned? The ministers were shocked and whispered to each other. Summoning ogres was already a very difficult exorcism spell, and now he was going to summon 4 of them. Does this guy want to die? When Wu Jing said this, he did not forget how the exorcist called Mu Bai died. Wasn't it because 2 messengers appeared at the same time? He did not manage to deal with them and was dragged away by the messengers. Now, Xian Bing wanted to summon 4 messengers. Elder Su Wu raised an eyebrow and asked, Xian Bing, are you confident? To be honest with you, Elder, I can already summon at least 5 messengers of hell. It was the Crown Prince who personally trained me. Originally, I wanted to go easy on them, but who would have thought that when I did, they would become too arrogant. As Xian Bing spoke, he glanced at Helian Weiwei. The spell that he had just cast was supposed to be activated when Helian Weiwei summoned the Reapers. 2 Reapers would appear at once, but he did not expect it to be activated in advance. He did not know what went wrong, it was really strange. However, it did not matter. The winner is king. In this competition, she would be the winner. Xian Bing retracted her gaze at this thought, her face full of arrogance. The people were still in awe as they focused their attention on Xian Bing. The Azure Dragon, who was hiding in the air, sensed her thoughts. He sneered and said, this guy is courting death. Isn't he courting death? The Fire Qilin was also standing at the side. Other than Beligaju, no one could see them. Playing exorcism in front of Master? These humans are as stupid as always. Master, how many messengers do you plan to let in this time? The Azure Dragon and I will make way. Beligaju slowly picked up the porcelain cup and played with it. He said calmly, let's be merciful. Didn't he want 4? Then let's find him 4. The Fire Qilin blinked, wondering if it had heard wrong. When did its master become so easy to talk to? Then, Bailey Jiaju added, find the 4 most powerful ones. The Fire Qilin was speechless. It was thinking too much. The most powerful messengers were equivalent to 2 normal messengers. This was more terrifying than 8 messengers at once. Master, this is not being merciful. You want to kill him with 1,000 cuts. The Fire Qilin whispered. He said a few words. Beligaju casually raised his eyebrows. Do you have a problem with that? No, absolutely not. Do as you please, my great king. The Fire Qilin kneeled on the ground and bowed. Beligaju did not look at it. Instead, he used his consciousness to communicate with Helian Vivian. When he summons the messengers, stay away from him. Huh? Helian Vivian was still a little confused. She was used to hearing Yuan Ming's evil voice. When it was replaced with such a graceful and noble voice, she was always half a beat slower. Beligaju changed his hand and half supported his face. His expression was lazy. Don't get splashed by the blood. It's dirty. As smart as Helian Vivian heard this, she knew that a certain highness was involved in this matter. The 2 messengers were obviously more irritable. Were they influenced by you? Yes. Beligaju's voice was very calm. He did not take it seriously. They were scared by me. There was no emotion in that voice, only the usual noble and elegant. Helian Vivian's mouth twitched. She did not know how the other party's fellow Taoists would feel when they heard the words a certain highness. They were trying their best to summon the messengers of the underworld. A certain highness did not put those little messengers in his eyes at all. This was the difference between them. This man not only knew how to attract hatred, but also fought bosses. Even in the game, he was a proper godlike figure. Helene Vivian once again felt that she was very wise when she made up her mind to chase a certain someone. Although at that time, she only liked a certain highness's appearance. I'll summon it myself later. Don't help me. Helene Vivian really wanted to see if she could summon anything. Didn't she just summon the little earth god? This time, what if she could summon a handsome man? Helene Weiwei's thoughts had just settled when she heard a cold laugh from the side of her ear. Pretty boy. Chapter 656. Helene Vivian's back stiffened. She cleared her throat and righteously said, "Can you stop peeking at my thoughts? I'll feel burdened if you do that." Hearing this, the Ligaju glanced at her. Helene Weiwei thought that her protest was finally effective. She straightened her back and straightened her back. Unexpectedly, that person's eyes slid over her body inch by inch. His magnetic voice carried a hint of heat. Even though they were very far away, Helene Vivian felt like he was kissing her earlobe as he spoke. Which part of your body hasn't been kissed by this highness? Your entire body belongs to this highness, let alone your thoughts. Helene Vivian knew that he was talking about how he pushed her into the hot spring pool last night. She couldn't breathe, so she kept wanting to walk out. However, her tailbone was still numb, so she could only beg him to let her go. In the end, she was coaxed by him several times. She was his, so he let her go. Helene Vivian's face heated up. She simply cut off the stream of consciousness and began to focus on the competition in front of her. She didn't want to hear what a certain highness would say later. However, a certain someone didn't seem to want to let her go. He kept staring at her with those deep eyes. His eyes were filled with waves of light. He connected the stream of consciousness again. You don't want this highness to know what you're thinking? Helene Vivian nodded solemnly. Lovers needed to maintain freshness. If he saw through all her thoughts, wouldn't it be meaningless? The Ligaju thought for a moment and said, "What do you plan to exchange for it?" He still wanted to negotiate? As expected, a certain highness was always this shameless no matter the situation. Helene Vivian spread her hands. "I still have a dragon core here." The Ligaju smiled with a unique arrogance. "Vivian, you want to use this kind of thing to fool this highness? Then tell me, what do you want?" Helene Vivian finally understood the feeling of having no choice but to lower one's head when under someone else's roof. She really wanted to bite the cold and overbearing his highness. The Ligaju supported his chin with his fingers and smiled slowly. "Tonight, you will take the initiative for once. Take the initiative to kiss my lips, take the initiative to sit on top of me and let me take you." Helene Vivian's first reaction was that no one could be more shameless than his highness. Her second reaction was to agree. After all, there would be a full moon in a few days, and they would have to perform dual cultivation. At that time, his highness might use some method to make her agree, so she might as well make a deal now. Anyway, his highness is so handsome, it's not a bad idea to sleep with him. Okay. Vivian calmly retracted her gaze. His highness raised his eyebrows in surprise, but when he saw her slightly red ears, he smiled again. Just as the two of them were conversing, Xian Bing had already started his summoning. He held the peachwood sword with one hand and drew a line between his teeth with his finger. Yellow talismans were written in blood. One by one, the yellow talismans floated in the air. There were 4 of them, front, back, left, right, north, south, east, and west, protecting Xian Bing in the middle. The yellow talismans were obviously different from when Mu Bai used them last time. Even the ministers who didn't know anything about exorcism could see the light emitted from the yellow talismans. "What is that?" the ministers exclaimed. The young man frowned. "It's the Reiki of an exorcist. Using Reiki to protect oneself can block the invasion of ghosts. But, not everyone can make the Reiki appear in the form of light. This Xian Bing is indeed very powerful. Even if the elders were here, they could only be on par with Xian Bing." The young man didn't say this out loud, but his words had revealed some kind of message. The faces of the ministers turned solemn once again. The Xianyuan kingdom had already won 1 round. Although they didn't want to admit defeat in the previous round. The rule was that whoever used the least amount of time would win. If Xian Bing from the Xianyuan kingdom won this round, the competition would be over. They would lose the right to protect the capital city completely. Thinking of this, Lu Yu and Wu Jing clenched their fists. They could only pray that Xian Bing would perform better. Once Xian Bing succeeded, the 3rd princess consort would definitely lose. This was because the princess consort couldn't summon more than 4 reapers. Furthermore, there was a time limit. They had seen what happened just now. If she didn't control it well, the reapers could take her life. Furthermore, the princess consort didn't have any yellow talismans. She might not be able to summon the Reapers. Just as Lu Yu and Wu Jing were worried, Xian Bing's voice shook. The wind around them turned cold again. Ghosts of hell, heed my command. Appear. Whoosh 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 whoosh. There seemed to be something flowing in the air. The surroundings of the hall seemed to be frozen. Amidst the Reiki, some exorcists couldn't help but stand up and stare at one point. There was a loud bang. The lanterns near the door went out, leaving only the faint shadows on the ground. Xian Bing smiled disapprovingly. He glanced at Hellion Vivian in disdain and was about to curse her. However, he discovered that the yellow talisman on his left was shaking violently out of his control. He could clearly feel something cold sticking to the left side of his face. Xian Bing didn't turn around. As a yin-yang master, he knew very well that humans were born with 3 fires, one on the left, one on the right, and one on the back. As long as the 3 fires were there, the yang qi would always be stronger than the yin qi. Once one of the 3 fires was put out, the yin qi would invade. That was why the old people always said that when walking alone at night, one shouldn't look left and right. Even if one heard something behind him, one shouldn't turn around. This was to prevent any dirty things from following him. It was the same situation now. Xian Bing heard someone calling his name again and again. In a daze, he even saw the wolf dog that he tortured to death. It was looking at him with a pair of ghostly eyes, as if it was waiting for him to lose so that it could jump on him and bite him to death. Xian Bing couldn't stand failure. When he was cultivating, he would vent his anger on his wolf dog whenever he saw others doing better than him. No one knew about this, because in everyone's eyes, he was always a gentleman who didn't care about other things. Even after the wolf dog's death, his fellow disciples from the Hall of Elders all came to comfort him, asking him to perform a ritual for the wolf dog and help it ascend to heaven. Xian Bing pretended to be sad, but in fact, he didn't care about the wolf dog at all. Not only did he not help it, but he also greedily took away the wolf dog's spirituality. As a result, the wolf dog's soul was always incomplete. It couldn't even go to hell and could only be a lonely soul. Obviously, Hellion Vivian also saw the wolf dog, but the other exorcists didn't. Hellion Vivian frowned and touched her eyes. What was going on? Chapter 657. Beligaju, can you see that wolf dog? Hellion Vivian felt that His Highness must be able to see things that the exorcists could not. Sure enough, Beligaju's low voice was heard, and a simple yes. Hellion Vivian continued to ask, that wolf dog seems to be emitting a black aura, which is different from the aura of the Reapers. Why is that? Beligaju frowned, and his eyes were a little gloomy. You can see the resentment of the wolf dog? Hellion Vivian nodded and said, the black aura seems to be getting stronger. Beligaju did not say anything, but looked at Hellion Vivian, and his eyes were getting gloomier. Is it because she is the reincarnation of the Phoenix Girl? Is that why she is so sensitive to dark things? What's wrong? Hellion Vivian did not hear Beligaju's response, so she turned to look at him. Nothing. Beligaju's voice was very calm. Under normal circumstances, even exorcists can't see that wolf dog, unless they have reached a certain level of cultivation. Hellion Vivian was interested, and she raised her eyebrows, as if she wanted to be praised. Does that mean that I am very powerful? Yes. Bailey Jiaju looked at her arrogant and hedonistic attitude. His eyes flashed with a trace of a smile, carrying an unknown pampering. Hellion Vivian was praised, and she calmed down. Does this wolf dog have a grudge against Xian Bing? Otherwise, it would not be so vicious, and there was also a kind of desperate sadness on its body. That's right. Beligaju curled his lips, and his handsome face was full of mockery. Dogs are the most loyal. Under normal circumstances, as long as their master needs it, they would even die for their master. If Xian Bing had not gone too far and abused it in front of others, and even sucked away all of its essence after it died, and used its soul again and again to practice the spirit binding technique, it would not have been trapped in the mountain for so many years without rest. Now, it is time for it to take revenge. As soon as Beligaju finished speaking, a gust of cold wind blew over. Woof! Woof! Everyone heard the unusual bark, one after another, and the tone was so low that it sent chills down their spines. Where did that sound come from? The exorcists looked to the right, and they were extremely nervous. In the school of Yin and Yang, dogs could communicate with spirits, and when a dog barks, an evil spirit is coming. The ministers also stood up, and there was an indescribable fear on their faces. Since the beginning of the competition, things had happened one after another, and it was beyond their knowledge. Now, the sound of the dog barks in the hall, they were even more scared. What was the palace? That was the place where the emperor stayed. There were so many soldiers guarding the place, so how could a dog appear? Unless the dog was already dead. Thinking of this possibility, the faces of the ministers turned even paler. Everyone huddled close to each other, looking left and right. The gloomy barks reverberated in the center of the hall, making it seem unusually ethereal. Xianbing seemed to be unable to hold it in any longer. He quietly turned his head and looked at his side. A face was pressed against his left shoulder. It was pale, with a straight nose and thin lips. It looked like it had been dead for a long time, and there was a cold air all over its body. However, this was not the reason why Xianbing was afraid. It was because the facial features of that face were clearly his own. Xianbing took a heavy step back. Her eyes were filled with fear. Everybody was terrified. "Steady!" Zongjingwenren shouted from the periphery, "What you see is not real. Don't move, or the formation will be broken." Xianbing quivered. He exerted force in his fingers and straightened his body. The yellow talismans surrounded him again, but they did not light up anymore. When the dog barked, Xianbing knew that he was in danger this time, and he did not have the spiritual light to protect himself. The dog was covered in blood. It didn't curl up in the corner anymore. Instead, it took a step forward, limped on one leg, and pounced on Xianbing with red eyes. It tore at Xianbing crazily. Xianbing cursed in a low voice and kicked the wolf away. He raised his hand and was about to cast a spell. Helian Weiwei could tell that it was a curse that would make one's soul vanish into thin air. The wolf stared at Xianbing with its red eyes. There was something indescribable in its eyes. Helian Weiwei knew that the Alsatian was here for revenge. However, if the Alsatian had not barked, the Reaper standing on the left of Xianbing would have broken through the array and taken away Xianbing's soul. In some ways, animals were more grateful than humans. It was Xianbing who raised it. It wanted to return the favor and then take revenge. The wolf was still merciful. However, Xianbing was determined to destroy them from the face of the earth. Otherwise, he would not have used the most poisonous spell in the art of exorcism, the Yin-Yang spell. Helian Vivian looked at the wolf's eyes. She thought for a moment and raised her hand slightly. Then, she gathered her spiritual qi and shouted, "Break." Obviously, Helian Vivian's spiritual qi was stronger than Xianbing's. Helian Vivian shouted, "Break." The Yin-Yang spell had lost its original spiritual power. The dog showed its fangs again and bit Xianbing's neck. When the yellow talisman fell, Xianbing frowned in pain. In a second, his face was filled with fear. He could feel the wind brought by the ghost scythe. It was getting closer and closer. At this moment, Zongjingwenren's figure flashed. His white fur coat fluttered and his hand that was holding the peachwood sword blocked in front of him. The yellow talisman rose again and protected Xianbing's body with a brighter spiritual light. Whether it was the Reapers or the Wolfhounds, they all took a step back at this moment. However, Zongjingwenren did not see the wolf. He only saw the ghost. Xianbing's pupils shrank. After a while, he regained his composure and said, Your Highness, get up." Zongjingwenren's voice was cold. Xianbing knew that he had made a big mistake this time. He held his aching neck and got up. His neck was not broken, but there was a black aura around it. He felt guilty and angry. He had cast the Yin-Yang spell. He did not know what happened to the wolf. Why did it have the ability to fight back? Xianbing did not know that the wolf was not the one who fought back. It was Helian Vivian who was standing in the corner and had not said a word. At this moment, the wolf had returned to its original hidden state. Only Helian Vivian and Beligaju could see it. In the dark, the wolf limped toward Helian Vivian with its left leg. Then, it knelt down with its other leg. Even though Helian Weiwei didn't understand the dog language, she understood that this wolf dog was grateful to her. Helian Weiwei thought for a while and felt that since she knew the Yin-Yang technique, it would be better to help this wolf dog find its way to the afterlife. Unexpectedly, the wolfhound shook its heavy head and insisted on standing in front of her, as if it wanted to protect her. Chapter 658. Helian Vivian hesitated for a while. She then heard Bailey Jiaju's clear, cold, and noble voice ring in her ears again. "Since it insists on staying by your side, then you should keep it." After Helian Weiwei heard this, she did not have any reaction. Fire Qilin and Green Dragon, who had been watching from the side, looked at each other. An ordinary dog would not be able to wander around in the netherworld after all its essence had been taken away. Moreover, it had a demonic aura. This proved that this wolf dog was not an ordinary dog when it was alive. Moreover, it was full of resentment when it died. This rare encounter had allowed it to absorb the resentment of the heavens and earth. Once it recognized its master, it would become a demonic dog. It was different from other mythical beasts. If the power of the demonic dog was used properly, it would not be afraid of any evil in the demon world or the underworld. In the past, when they encountered such rare animals, their masters would want to hunt them down and keep them as their mounts. This time, he did not want to keep it. He gave it to his wife. Helene Vivian saved the wolf dog because it was convenient. She did not expect anything in return. After all, she had raised dogs in the modern world and knew that dogs were the most loyal. She would save them if she could. Now that she heard His Highness's words, she was still thinking about it. His Highness did not need to look to know what Helene Vivian was thinking. If you don't keep it, it will lose control of itself sooner or later and lose its nature. The wolf dog seemed to understand His Highness's words. It immediately pressed forward with its paws. The black aura around its body was like a fog. Helene Vivian did not know whether to laugh or cry. Who did it recognize as its master? Why was it so obedient to His Highness? All right then. But I still have Little White in my fantasy space. Don't fight. The wolf dog nodded its thick head. The demonic aura that was emitting from its body made the surroundings feel cold. Helene Vivian had made up her mind to keep the Alsatian, so she acted quickly. While everyone was looking at Zongjing Wenren, she bit her finger and 3 drops of blood dripped down. The wolfhound's body trembled, and the black aura on its body became thicker and thicker. In the end, it gathered into a black fog. When it appeared again, its appearance had changed. Its thick black fur, and its body was more than twice its size. At this moment, the wolfhound looked like a king, majestic and steady. The only thing that didn't change was the black fog emitted from its body. It seemed to have blended perfectly into the darkness, and it was much thicker than before. The azure dragon and fire Qilin glanced at each other again. This time, the 2 divine beasts were a bit shocked. Only Beligaju remained indifferent as he glanced at the wolfhound. The Alsatian nodded and stood in front of Helene Vivian. However, this time, it was even more obvious that it was protecting her. Its entire body was beastly, and it could scare away ghosts and spirits. At this point, Xian Bing naturally couldn't see the wolfhound. He looked extremely embarrassed, and his combed hair was scattered to the side. As a civil official of the War Dragon dynasty, Lu Yu's mouth finally came in handy. This round has shown us the Xianyuan Kingdom's ability to exorcise demons. How could they deal with 4 reapers? Haha, so they are risking their lives to deal with them. Old Lu, you are so good at talking. If it were up to me, I would say that you are boasting too much. You can't back up your words. Xiong Jing laughed out loud. How dare you mock our 3rd princess consort? You are the weakling. Xian Bing gritted his teeth. He could feel that the gazes on him were full of sarcasm. The whispers around him made his face even redder. He simply pushed all the blame to the wolfhound and loudly defended himself. If it wasn't for the wolfhound that suddenly jumped out, the formation definitely wouldn't have been broken. The wolfhound? Master Su Wu frowned when he heard this. Xian Bing's voice was fierce. Master, do you remember the wolfhound that I used to keep? I raised and fed it, and it did this to me. It even came back to haunt me after it died. It was because of its appearance that the reapers had a chance to attack. I still remember that you used to bring it into the palace. Zongjing Yuer's face was filled with anger. She looked like she was condemning Xian Bing righteously. It is so ungrateful. That's why you shouldn't keep such a beast. It even came back to bite its master after it died. Master Su Wu didn't care about what happened. Most importantly, he needed this incident to protect the Xianyuan Kingdom's reputation. With the wolfhound as an excuse, at least they wouldn't be in a bad situation. No wonder you were not performing well. There was an external cause. Elder Su Wu stroked his beard. He finally had a good explanation for Xian Bing's behavior. Helene Weiwei curled her lips into a smile and said, every exorcist knows what exactly happened. A dog's loyalty is the purest among all animals. Why would it come to you at this time? Xian Bing, do you think no one will know about the evil deeds you have done? I don't know what you are talking about, 3rd princess consort. Although Xian Bing said this, he felt extremely weak in his heart. It was impossible. This woman couldn't know about what happened in the past. Elder Su Wu saw that the situation was not right. He immediately said, all right, Xian Bing, you were not performing well in this round. Go and have a rest. He said this because he knew better than anyone else that Helene Vivian was implying something. He couldn't let her reveal anything that would harm them. You said that you were not performing well when you lost? Are all the people of the Xianyuan Kingdom so shameless? The little one looked up as he ate. Because he came over to eat, one of the officials didn't dare to come close to his seat. He was afraid that the 7th prince would eat him if he wasn't satisfied. When Xian Bing heard the little one's words, he felt like he had been slapped in the face. He clenched his fists and felt ashamed. Zongjing Yuer smiled gently. She looked at Xian Bing and said, the 7th prince is really a child. Xian Bing summoned 4 reapers at the same time. If it wasn't for the wolf, he would have succeeded. As for the third princess consort, I wonder how many reapers she can summon? The result is not decided yet. It's too early to say that we have lost. You are right, princess. The people of the Xianyuan kingdom don't like to argue with others. However, we don't know if the third princess consort can summon the reapers. You are mocking me. Be careful, someone will make a mistake later. Xian Bing was confident that even if he didn't succeed, he was better than the third princess consort who had never learned the art of exorcism. Hearing this, the officials of the War Dragon Empire were uncertain. After all, what Xian Bing said was true. With the third princess consort's ability, it would be difficult for her to summon the reapers. Chapter 659. Actually, summoning the reapers of hell is a dangerous thing. If the third princess consort can't do it, why don't we ask someone else to do it? What if they get hurt? Zongjing Yuer continued. It seemed like she was being kind, but in fact, her words only made the two old officials of the War Dragon Kingdom distrust Hellion Vivian even more. More and more people looked at Hellion Vivian with suspicion, worry, and disdain. None of the exorcists had high hopes for her. Wei Wei didn't even move an inch as she stood in the middle of the array. Her appearance was as lazy as before. Her hooded fur cloak fluttered in the wind within the main hall. Her face was as calm as the wind and clouds. She didn't take out a yellow talisman. She merely stood there, not paying attention to the sounds all around her. It's impossible for her to summon the reapers of hell in that posture. Xian Bing sneered. She really doesn't know anything. Does she think that exorcism is that easy? Zongjing Yuer sighed and said, the third princess consort is too competitive. She wants to win even when she's not good at it. At that moment, the officials of the War Dragon Kingdom were in despair. Although they were mentally prepared, it was impossible for Hellion Vivian to win. However, they did not want to lose too badly. But now, looking at the princess consort's posture, the reapers of hell would not appear. However, what they didn't expect was that at this moment, a gust of black wind suddenly surged out of the main hall. Like a fog, it rapidly rose up. Hellion Vivian clenched her fist, and spiritual energy surged into her palm. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Listen to my command, appear. The invisible air rose rapidly with the incantation, and Hellion Vivian's cape fluttered. Her long black hair fluttered in the wind, and she looked indescribably handsome. The crowd widened their eyes in disbelief. The surrounding air was not only cold, but ice had formed at the corners of the walls. When he looked over again, he saw no less than 10 reapers standing in front of Hellion Vivian. Each of them was wearing a black robe, and their faces could not be seen. Their heads were half-bowed, and their words and actions were filled with respect. Not only the ministers present, but even the exorcists were shocked when they saw the scene. Their eyes flickered violently, and they could not focus at all. 10? She actually summoned 10 reapers? How did she do it? You clearly don't have any yellow talismans with you, right? Look at those messengers, what are they doing? The young man muttered to himself, they are greeting the princess. This is impossible. The first reaction of the exorcist from Huangzi Nation was to deny it. It was not because he had a problem with Hellion Vivian, but because only the best exorcist would be able to make the reapers greet them. Otherwise, it would be impossible to achieve such a feat. This is too inconceivable. The other exorcists began to discuss among themselves. However, most of them were amazed by Hellion Vivian. How did she do it? Lu Yu and Wu Jing opened their mouths wide. After the initial shock, they were filled with indescribable joy. We won. We won. 10 of them. The princess has actually summoned 10 reapers. 4 is nothing. Look at our princess. 10 of them. Can you even summon them? Wu Jing had long disliked the people from Xianyuan Kingdom. They only knew how to bully others with their superiority. Now, they had been slapped in the face. As soon as the 10 reapers appeared, Xian Bing's expression changed. Her initial confidence and complacency had completely disappeared, and even her lips had turned pale. Zongjing Yuer clenched the white handkerchief in her hand because of what she had just said. Even Zongjing Wenren did not expect that Hellion Vivian would be able to summon 10 reapers. However, at this point, Elder Su Wu did not give up. Lord Wu, the third princess consort, has yet to send the reapers away. It's too early to say anything now. Let's wait for the final result. After such a long time, the reapers have yet to be sent away. I'm sure the third princess consort is not as relaxed as she seems. Upon hearing Elder Su Wu's words, the young man's heart sank. The longer the reapers stay in the human world, the easier it is for them to change. I'm worried that the princess consort will not be able to send so many reapers back to the Yin Yang Road at once. Ordinary people might not understand this, but the exorcists did. When they saw that none of the reapers had left, they all took a step back. Elder Suwu was even more convinced that his guess was correct. He stroked his white beard and let out a long sigh. The princess is right. The third princess consort is indeed too competitive. If she doesn't send those reapers away, even if the crown prince and I join forces, we might not be able to save her from so many reapers. She probably doesn't have enough spiritual energy to send 10 reapers back, Zongjing Wenren said calmly. His tone of certainty made everyone from the War Dragon Empire anxious. If the reapers could not be sent back, the third princess consort would be in danger. But at this moment, an unprecedented scene appeared in front of everyone's eyes once again. Hellion Vivian said something, and 6 of the reapers who had formed a circle suddenly retreated, leaving only 4 behind in the fog. Hellion Vivian led the 4 reapers and walked toward the diplomatic group from the Xianyuan kingdom. Darkness spread behind her, as if it was going to devour everything. What are you doing? Elder Su Wu, who had been speaking confidently, stepped forward to block her path. Hellion Vivian's voice was deep, and her aura was like that of a king. Elder Su Wu, this is none of your business. You'd better step aside. Third princess consort, you still have 4 reapers behind you. Do you intend to negotiate with the Xianyuan kingdom like this? Elder Su Wu wanted to use the method he used to deal with the imperial court. Hellion Vivian laughed coldly. I have no interest in having anything to do with the Xianyuan kingdom. Just now, your exorcist failed to summon the reapers and blamed everything on a wolf dog. Now that the 4 reapers are here, I'll let them finish what they started earlier. As she spoke, Hellion Vivian glanced in Xian Bing's direction. You can take him away now. To everyone's surprise, the 4 reapers obeyed Hellion Vivian's order and rushed in front of Xian Bing. Elder Su Wu blocked her with his arm. Third princess consort, don't cross the line. Xian Bing has done nothing. How could you order the reapers to take him away? Are you trying to kill him? Done nothing? Hellion Vivian laughed again and said in a deep voice, Blackie, come out. A cloud of fog rose from the darkness. The large wolf dog stood there, staring at Xian Bing. The hatred in its eyes made everyone's hearts tremble. Xian Bing took a step back and almost fell onto the wooden chair. Chapter 660. I'm sure you don't forget what Blackie looked like before it died. Hellion Weiwei strode over and placed her hand on the Alsatian's head. She glanced at Xian Bing's face and said in a calm and emotionless voice, First, you broke its leg. Then, you broke its ribs. You and Princess Zongjing made it sound so nice. Feed it and take care of it? Hee, you remember these small favors so clearly. Why don't you say that when you fell into the valley when you were cultivating, if Little Black didn't call people to save you, you would have been devoured by a pack of wolves. But you, not only did you not kill Little Black, you even stole its spiritual energy. A trash like you actually has the face to say that you're ungrateful? I'm impressed by your shamelessness. Perhaps what Hellion Vivian said was too shocking. Not only the others, but even the exorcists from the Xianyuan dynasty looked at Xian Bing, as if they were trying to find something from his face. Xian Bing shouted in a deep voice, Don't slander me. I know, it was you. No wonder the wolf suddenly appeared. It was you who let it out to stop me. You know better than anyone why Blackie was here. Hellion Vivian looked at him condescendingly. You've been finding excuses for yourself since just now. In fact, if Blackie didn't bark, you would have been dragged away by the reapers. Xian Bing's fingers trembled, but he refused to admit it. Third princess consort, don't slander me just because you're special. Who can prove what you're saying? Zongjing Yuer also said, Third princess consort, we all saw how Xian Bing treated the wolf. There was no abuse like what you said. It's too fake. Yes, third princess consort, you can't make up a story just to win, can you? Elder Suwu joined in at the right time. In fact, he already knew what was going on. Logically speaking, dead animals would quickly enter the underworld for reincarnation. However, after so many years, this wolfhound was still a lonely soul. Furthermore, it still carried a huge amount of resentment. The only person who could cause it to behave this way was its original owner. However, even if that was the case, a wolfhound could not speak. That meant that there was no proof. Xian Bing shared the same thoughts as Elder Su Wu. He would like to see what Hellion Weiwei, this meddlesome, could do when there was no evidence. The wolf saw through his thoughts and barked again. Its fangs and black fur stood up, and its scarlet eyes were frighteningly bright. If Hellion Vivian was not pressing its head, it would have rushed over and bit the person to death. Blackie, don't be impulsive. If you bite him to death, you'll never be able to prove yourself. Didn't he wanted evidence? We'll give him the evidence. Helene Vivian turned around and said to the reapers behind her, "Tell me everything you know." Hearing Helene Vivian's order, the exorcist stood up immediately. She wants the reapers to speak? How is that possible? The reapers only take souls when they enter the human world. They don't speak unless the king of hell gives the order personally, right? The exorcists felt that what they saw today was more exciting than any other day in their lives. Another exorcist muttered to himself, "It's not impossible. Unless that person has 100 years of cultivation. But this third princess consort, let's wait a little longer. The reapers might not speak." The exorcists held their breaths. However, they did not know that. As long as His Highness was there. Not to mention letting those ghost servants speak. Even if they were asked to do a zombie dance, they would still raise their arms and legs to satisfy the man sitting in the seat of honor. The reapers standing behind Helene Vivian did not move very quickly. Because they were dead, they did everything expressionlessly. Now that they heard Helene Vivian's order, they subconsciously looked in the direction of Beligaju. They were indeed summoned by Helene Vivian, but after seeing this human guardian demon, they were completely scared out of their wits. That was clearly the Great Devil. That's right, the Great Devil. That dog-like appearance, that perfect side profile of an ice sculpture, and that untainted and disdainful sitting posture. At that time, Beligaju only glanced at them indifferently. With just one glance, they already knew what to do. Absolutely obey orders. But fuck, why didn't anyone tell them that the great demon was still alive? Did their Lord King of Hell know that this great devil was still alive? Back then, the two of them fought fiercely, and the sky was dark. Lord King of Hell, who lost every time, was in a very bad mood. He was irritable in the underworld every day. Every time they brought back ghosts, Lord King of Hell was not satisfied. He insisted that they go and bring back the great devil's soul. No matter what, they could be considered the oldest batch of reapers in the underworld. Even if they did not contribute, they still had brains. How could they be stupid enough to touch a great devil? Therefore, they were very smart and sent a batch of newly dead reapers to be scapegoats. As expected, none of them returned. At that time, they were simply too quick-witted. In the beginning, they did not take this summoning seriously. They were just surprised that an exorcist could summon the oldest batch of reapers. They did not expect that when they arrived, they would find that there were 9 other reapers besides them. They could not help but be curious about the summoner. But now, they were not curious. They only wanted to complete the great devil's mission as soon as possible and return to the underworld as soon as possible. The human world was too dangerous. It was the safest to be at home. They were really scared to death. Don't be fooled by their calm appearance. In fact, there were only 3 words in their hearts: please let them go. It seems that these reapers can't talk. Look at their expressionless faces. They are very gloomy. The exorcist speculated. The 4 reapers were speechless. Don't spout nonsense. They were born with dead faces. Plus, their reactions were slow. Still not speaking? Are you waiting for me to give you a kick? A man's unique and noble voice sounded in the stream of consciousness. The 4 reapers instantly began to move twice as fast as usual. Black gas filled the air. As one of the reapers opened his mouth, the temperature in the hall dropped by a few degrees. It was not because of anything else. It was because of the tone of his voice. It was emotionless, as cold as a dead person's voice. Along with the astonishment of the crowd, the gloomy coldness slowly seeped into their ears. Xian Bing, born in 72 years, entered the Tao at the age of 5. At the age of 7, she pushed down a fellow disciple to become an apprentice. At the age of 10, she almost killed her own master because of her cowardice. At the age of 13, she encountered a great calamity. Thanks to the help of the wolf and dog, her life was extended. Chapter 661. Xian Bing took a fancy to the Alsatian spirit, so he brought it back to the sect. He took care of it for a year, but there was no progress in his cultivation. When he saw that the Alsatian could not help him, he felt that he had brought back a good-for-nothing. His temper flared up, and he would vent his anger on the Alsatian from time to time, until he tortured the Alsatian to death. As the messenger finished speaking, everyone's eyes widened as they looked at Xian Bing again. Even the wolfhound that had saved him was beaten to death. How vicious would one have to be to do such a thing? Xian Bing panicked. No, I didn't. Don't believe Helene Vivian's words. That Alsatian was ungrateful and wanted to bite me. That was why I accidentally killed it. After that, I was sad for a long time. My senior and junior brothers can testify for me. Even a rabbit will bite when it is cornered, let alone a dog that you tortured every day. Helian Weiwei laughed coldly. I didn't say it, it was the Reapers. You're an exorcist, so you should know that Reapers know about the affairs of mortals before they die, so you wouldn't spout nonsense. Compared to your senior and junior brothers, they're more aware of the situation back then. The third Princess Consort is right. The messenger knows the truth. Although they were not from the War Dragon Empire, as exorcists, some of them still had a conscience. Brother Xianbing, since things have come to this, you should just admit it. It will be too embarrassing if you continue to make a fuss. Xianbing's body swayed. He could not say anything else. Sweat poured down his forehead as he looked at Zongjing and Elder Su Wu. Elder Su Wu did not expect the messenger to speak either. Looking at the people pointing at them, he felt that something was out of his control. Zongjing face was pale. She was not as arrogant as before. Seeing this, Xianbing wanted to run away. Helian Vivian moved and stood in front of him. She smiled. Xianbing, the messengers haven't finished talking. Why don't you listen? Not everyone gets to hear about their own life story. As if responding to Helian Vivian's words, the messenger of death's calm voice sounded again. Xianbing, you have done a lot of evil in your life. You were killed by wolves and dogs at the age of 25. After you died, you entered the path of animals. Died at the mouth of a wolf dog? Xianbing shuddered when he heard this. He turned his head and looked at the Alsatian who was standing on Helian Weiwei's left. When he met the Alsatian's gloomy eyes, his breathing changed because of fear. Helian Vivian lowered her eyes and looked at him. Her eyes were faint. Good and evil will eventually be repaid. The heavenly Tao is a good samsara. If you don't believe it, look up and see who will be spared by the heavens. Xiao He, go, it's time for you to personally take revenge. Dogs are the most loyal. Before Helian Vivian gave the order. Even though the wolfhound hated Xianbing, it just stood aside quietly and did not attack. Now, with Helian Vivian's permission, it no longer hid the murderous look in its eyes. Its black body was like a hurricane as it pounced on Xianbing. In an instant, the sound of bones shattering pierced through his eardrums, and the crisp sound of bones cracking rang out. Xianbing's arm in front of him was bitten off by the wolfhound. His white bones were exposed to the air. Bright red blood splattered all over the ground. Zongjing was the closest to Xianbing. As a princess, she had never seen such a bloody scene. She vomited on the spot. Xianbing was in so much pain that his face was twisted. However, he did not give up. He grabbed the wolfhound's head with one hand. There was a yellow talisman on his hand. But soon, he found that his yellow talisman could not stop the wolfhound. His eyes were filled with panic and he shook violently. Your Highness. Help! He called for Zongjing Wenren. Helian Vivian was one step ahead of Zongjing Wenren. She shielded the wolfhound's back and said calmly, I won't help Little Black because it's his own vengeance. However, if anyone dares to hurt Little Black, they will have to ask for my permission first. Also, I would like to advise Crown Prince Wenren. Perhaps there are not many exorcists in the War Dragon Empire. However, if it's a simple fight, the Xianyuan dynasty is no match for us. As soon as Helian Vivian finished speaking, a few slapping sounds were heard. Dozens of martial artists behind her stood up. Among them, Shao Qi's figure was the most prominent. He stepped on the bald head of an old official and held the black wooden stick that he usually hid in his hand. He looked domineering. Finally, it was time for his favorite part. He knew it. Master was here. Exorcism was not necessary. His master was the biggest devil in the world. These people did not even recognize him. They were still yelling about exorcism. Fighting was better. Beat them to a pulp. Humph, how dare they challenge third sister-in-law. They were courting death. The old official with Shao Qi on his head was in trouble. He kept saying, Your Highness, please be gentle. Don't move. My hair. Elder Su Wu was undoubtedly the most experienced and astute among them. He reached out and grabbed Zongjing Wenren's arm. He said in a low voice, Your Highness, it doesn't matter if we lose this battle. After all, we won the previous battle. The War Dragon Empire is at most tied with us. However, if you interfere in the wolfhound's matter, we won't be able to gain any advantage when the two empires start fighting. Zongjing Wenren stopped in his tracks and clenched his fists. What about Xianbing? If we don't intervene, Xianbing will be in danger. Your Highness, we must focus on the big picture. Elder Su Wu's voice deepened. Once we win, we can avenge Xianbing however we want. The next round will be a team battle. If His Highness and I work together, we can even summon the Judge of Hell, let alone the 10 Reapers. Furthermore, the War Dragon dynasty only has one exorcist, Helian Weiwei. The rest of them are useless and useless. Once the third round is over, our army will be able to enter the capital and obtain the right to guard the seal. This was the mission that the young master had personally assigned to him. He had to complete it no matter what. Of course, he was not going to guard the seal. Instead, he was going to create more resentment and destroy the seal as soon as possible. The young master was severely injured and could only suspend the plan to create resentment. However, he could not give up. As long as the seal was broken, he would be able to become the young master's most loyal servant and enjoy the supreme right to eternal life. Elder Su Wu had tasted the sweetness of this a long time ago. Otherwise, with his 80-odd years of age, he would have died a long time ago. It was the young master who had given him the hope of eternal life. He must make good use of it and complete his plan of creating resentment. Chapter 662. Your Highness. Xian Bing let out his last scream before his throat was bitten by the wolfhound. Xian Bing had no part of his body left intact. Before he died, he remembered that he had done the same thing to the wolfhound. At that time, he broke the wolfhound's left leg with a wooden stick. He even cut the wolfhound's hamstring with a sword. Otherwise, the wolfhound's leg would have grown back. Now, his retribution had come. Only half of his left leg was left. Without the wolfhound's bite, he would die from excessive bleeding in less than 15 minutes. Xian Bing fell into a pool of blood. His pale lips trembled as he let out a heart-wrenching cry. He knew that he could not be saved. The elders and the crown prince had given up on him. The only one who did not give up on him was the wolfhound. However, he had beaten it to death. People would always regret when they died. But it was too late. The four reapers dragged Xian Bing's soul out of his body with iron chains. They locked his soul and left without looking back. The ministers did not know if they were hallucinating. They felt that the reapers were running for their lives. No way. They must have seen wrongly. Haha, how could the reapers be afraid of people? What they did not know was that the reapers were whispering to each other at that moment. Fourth brother, look back and see if the big devil has caught up with us. Big brother, don't scare me. I am a coward. Hellion Vivian, who knew what happened, was speechless. Although the bloodstains in the main hall were frightening, after listening to the messenger of death, everyone knew that Xian Bing deserved what happened to him. The result of the competition was obvious. Hellion Vivian had won an absolute victory. 10 reapers. Not only did she summon them, she even made them talk. The ministers of the War Dragon dynasty were excited. They all looked at Hellion Vivian as if they were looking at a hero. Even the old official who had just knelt down to beg Beligaju for a marriage alliance lowered his head and personally apologized to Hellion Vivian. Just now, this old official and official, you made things difficult for third princess consort. It's just that, we really did it for the sake of the imperial court and the safety of the people. The two of you are both senior officials of 3 generations, and also the retired emperor's subordinates. Just now, the two of you were making things difficult for me, not for me, but for the royal family. Since they are from a neighboring country, we should indeed be modest and courteous. However, being modest and courteous is one thing, and taking a step back is another. My War Dragon dynasty is a great country. Do we need to rely on marriage to maintain anything? The two ministers should also think about it carefully. Good men should fight when it is time to fight. This is the way of a ruler. His Highness's thoughts were not difficult to understand. He was thinking of the relationship between the two ministers, so the two ministers should not disappoint him. Remember one thing, those who offend me, Battle Dragon, will be killed no matter how far away you are. Hellion Vivian's words were firm and gentle, making the blood of the people who heard it boil. Especially that sentence, those who offend me, Battle Dragon, will be killed no matter how far away you are. All the generals who heard it raised their arms and cheered. This was the arrogance that their War Dragon dynasty should have. They remembered that there was such a sentence a long time ago. We are a great country. Our upbringing tells us not to steal, rob, or invade. However, that does not mean that we are weak and incompetent. Once you dare to move your sword towards us, we will definitely beat you until it is too late for regrets. Beligaju sat on the seat of honor, his left hand lazily supporting the side of his face. Behind him were dozens of shadow guards. His right hand stretched out towards Hellion Vivian, giving off an oppressive aura of a ruler. This made the people from the other 2 neighboring countries feel timid. This was only the second round of the competition, and they already regretted conspiring to force Beligaju. Originally, the envoy's plan was very good. The War Dragon dynasty did not have an exorcist, nor did they know the art of yin and yang. In addition, the whole country was in hell. Beligaju was not favored by the emperor for many years and did not know how to form cliques to pursue personal interests. This was undoubtedly the best time for them to take action. However, the result was that not only did the War Dragon dynasty not have internal strife, they were even more united than when the emperor was in power. This was because Beligaju's methods were too ruthless and too fast. Whoever was unconvinced, he would directly behead them. In addition, the woman he married was too powerful. In this competition, the reason why the Xianyuan dynasty lost so much face was because of Hellion Vivian. This woman, not only did she know how to exorcise, but she also knew how to use people. With her words, it would be strange if the entire War Dragon dynasty was not united. Lu Yu and Wu Jing's eyes also lit up. They looked at each other, then looked at the couple sitting on the dragon throne again. Only the third prince could sit on that seat. And the seat next to the third prince, only the eldest daughter of the Hellion family was worthy of it. Other than her, any other woman standing next to His Highness would be inferior. Only her languid and carefree attitude complemented His Highness' indifference and nobility. Are you trying to win people's hearts again? Beligaju pinched Hellion Vivian's hand. Hellion Vivian knew how to take advantage of the situation. She also extended her other hand. Pinch my right hand too. What do you mean by winning people's hearts? I am clearly helping you cut the peach blossoms. With your attractive face, you should wear a mask when you go out in the future. Cutting peach blossoms is a laborious job, you have to pay me a service fee. Service fee? Beligaju pulled her over and said in a low voice, don't I pay you every night? So madam thinks it is too little, your head. Hellion Vivian was numb from the wind, and her legs instantly felt weak. This man knew her body's weakness too well, simply hateful. Beligaju acted as if there was no one around and directly hugged her into his arms. You. Hellion Vivian knew that it was useless to question a certain highness, so she simply turned her face and buried it in Beligaju's arms. Hug all you want, anyway, the person that the ministers will be talking about will not be her. In reality, someone as ruthless as the third prince had never put these officials in his eyes. Even those two old officials just now, if it wasn't for the little thing in his arms wanting to keep them alive, according to his temper, he would have already dragged them out and beheaded them. He knew that this little thing did not want him to kill too many people. Beligaju chuckled softly and ran his fingers through Hellion Vivian's long hair. His gentle and elegant movements made him look like he was stroking his pet. He was born handsome, and when he smiled like that, it was as if the snow had just melted. All the ministers in the hall were dumbfounded. They had never seen the third prince smile so gently before. Zongjingyuer was even more jealous. She could not accept it. Why? Why does that woman deserve to be treated differently by the third prince? Chapter 663. Zongjingyuer pushed away the maid who was wiping her mouth. Her eyes were gloomy, but the smile on her face was still soft. Her eyes were red from vomiting, which made her look even more pitiful. She spoke softly, Elder, if I remember correctly, this is only the second round. We should be in a tie with the War Dragon dynasty, right? Elder Su Wu was still thinking about how to remind the envoys. He could tell that after what had just happened, the people from Huangzi Nation would inevitably have some ideas. Just as he was thinking of how to explain it, Zongjingyuer spoke up. He immediately smiled and said, Princess, you remember correctly. It is indeed a draw. The third round is a team battle. Each nation has to send at least 2 exorcists to the battlefield. They will use spells to summon judges to exorcise the evil spirits that possess the people. Summon judges? Someone exclaimed in disbelief. Usually, it's very difficult for evil spirits to come out of a person's body. If we use exorcism, we can make the evil spirits disappear. But this way, the person will also become a fool. Summoning a judge who is more powerful than a ghost servant and using their evil aura to lure the evil spirits out and then exorcise the evil spirits is a good idea. It's just that this method has never been used before. Once the evil spirits come out and possess another person, the evil spirit's resentment will increase. When the time comes and we can't control it, it's very likely that everyone in the hall won't be able to leave. Elder Su Wu glanced at the envoys from the 2 neighboring nations and continued, Everyone, don't worry. I will be fighting alongside the Crown Prince in this round. There will be no mistakes. Zongjing Wenren is going to fight? The exorcists from the 2 nations were excited. Zongjing Wenren's exorcism skills had always been unfathomable. When they came to the capital city, they did not receive news that Zongjing Wenren was going to fight. Now, he was going to participate in the third round? In the entire Divine Mainland, other than the guardians of the Exorcist tribe, there were very few people who were better than Zongjing Wenren. He was undoubtedly a top-notch exorcist. He could easily summon more than 10 messengers and make them obey his orders. If such a person were to make a move, then they would definitely win. The two emissaries looked at each other and finally calmed down. They had a new idea. We have two people here who have been possessed by malicious spirits, but we haven't been able to find a way to deal with them. Since Elder Suwu can do it, let them come out. As they spoke, the two emissaries glanced behind them. Their entourage quickly pulled the chains and dragged the two people in. The two of them had their heads lowered, but their eyes were cold and gloomy. Even their fingernails were black. They looked like they were about to pounce on anyone and tear them apart. The people in the main hall were scared out of their wits by this scene. Looking at the yellow talismans pasted on the two people, each one was emitting a red light because of their movements. They used to be exorcists. After coming to the War Dragon Dynasty, they sensed that something was wrong in the capital city, so they came to the capital city before us. I didn't expect them to become like this when we arrived. The emissary from the neighboring country let out a long sigh and smiled bitterly. I didn't want to say this at first. After all, it's a hindrance to the country. However, if these two people don't recover soon, I'm afraid that even the chain ghost chains won't be able to suppress them. They are different from other people. Once possessed by malicious spirits, they are 5 times more dangerous than ordinary people. If Crown Prince Wenren didn't do it himself, I wouldn't have dared to release them. As the emissary spoke, one of the two people let out a low roar. The roar did not sound like a human's. He reached out his left hand and tried to grab the minister beside him. If the exorcist had not held a peachwood sword to his throat, that thing would have scratched the minister's face. The ministers were all ordinary people. How could they withstand such a shock? Their faces were extremely pale. At the same time, as the two possessed people approached, the temperature in the main hall dropped again. It was different from the coldness when the reapers appeared. This time, everyone felt as if there was something extra on their shoulders. Cold air was blowing at them, making their hair stand on end. Elder Suwu furrowed his white brows as well. Before they came here, they had indeed discussed this matter with the neighboring country's people. They had agreed that they would take care of two people who had been possessed by malicious spirits. However, this matter seemed to be more difficult to deal with than he had expected. However, it did not matter. If he and the Crown Prince worked together, it would be a piece of cake to deal with an exorcist possessed by a malicious spirit. Thinking of this, Elder Suwu smiled again. He stroked his beard and said, "We don't have much to worry about. We just want to see if the third Princess Consort can accept the challenge. After all, this is a team battle. It's different from the previous two." If it were not for Elder Suwu's reminder, the people from the other two countries would have forgotten that this was a team battle. No matter how powerful Hellion Vivian was, the War Dragon Dynasty only had one capable exorcist. Next was the young man who only knew the basics and knew nothing else. If these two people were to face off against Crown Prince Wenren and Elder Suwu, they might not even be able to successfully subdue the malicious spirit, let alone win. Even if Hellion Vivian could summon a judge, it would be useless if the young man knew nothing. The emissaries regretted their decision just now. Now, they knew that the War Dragon Dynasty would definitely lose miserably this time. This way, the decision they made back then would not be in vain. Luyu also realized this problem. He turned around and glanced at the people from the Elder Compound. However, for so many years, ever since the Emperor started thinking about alchemy, the Elder Compound had given up on the Yin and Yang arts in order to comply with the Emperor's wishes. They only focused on cultivating in their dreams. Hence, they could not even produce a decent exorcist. In addition, all of them were very cowardly. They did not behave like the subjects of the War Dragon Dynasty at all. "Lord Lu, if there's no other way, let me do it. Even if I die, I will guard the back for the Princess Consort." The young man was still young, but his back was still straight. Now that things had come to this, everyone knew that no matter who went up, the final result would not be very good. However, for the dignity of the country, they had to fight. However, did they really want to send someone to their death? Lu Yu's forehead was covered in sweat. He stopped the young man. "Let me think about it. Let me think about it. There must be another way." They were definitely not at the end of the line. However, what was the other way? Could it be that only one person could enter? Chapter 664. Lord Lu, other than me, no one else is willing to go. At least I know a little about sorcery. The young man said anxiously. His face was pale. It was not that he was not afraid, but even if he was, he still wanted to fight for his country. However, that was a path with a slim chance of survival. As a civil official, Lu Yu could not bear to see such a young child throw his life away. Elder Su Wu was certain of this, which was why he was so overbearing. Zongjing Yuer lowered her voice, as if she was worried about Hellion Vivian. If we can't gather enough people, won't the third princess consort lose this competition? According to the rules of the competition, that is indeed the case. Elder Su Wu said that it was fair, but in reality, the rules of the competition were more beneficial to those with discerning eyes. Zongjing Yuer wiped the corners of her mouth with her handkerchief and said worriedly, then there's no other way. The War Dragon Dynasty can't send a second person. Hearing the conversation between the two, the young man panicked and called out, Lord Lu. Lu Yu hesitated for a moment, then gritted his teeth and said, then, he was interrupted by a familiar deep voice from the seat of honor. I will compete. What? Everyone turned to look at the source of the voice. She saw Bailey Jiaju put down his crossed long legs and stood up unhurriedly. His black cloak reached his ankles, but it was not stained with the slightest bit of dust. His perfect side profile was like an ice sculpture, emitting a diamond-like brilliance. The wind that poured in blew his hair, making him look like a deity from the 4 seas and 8 wastelands. It was just 4 words, but the entire hall seemed to explode. All the officials' first reaction was to stop him. Your Highness, you mustn't. Even Lu Yu disagreed. He got down on one knee and said, Your Highness, exorcism is different from martial energy. This time, there will be hostile spirits possessing humans. You, hostile spirits possessing humans? The Ligaju curled his thin lips into a half-smile. I would like to see which hostile spirit dares to possess me. Lu Yu opened her mouth, wanting to say something. On the other side, Hellion Wei Wei had already pulled Bailey Jiaju to the competition position. Stand behind me later, I'll deal with the hostile ghost in front of you. Remember, don't let the ghost see you, your face will be ravished by it. Lu Yu was at a loss for words. Was that the main point? All right. At this time, His Highness was very obedient. He leisurely followed behind Hellion Vivian, elegantly waiting to be eaten. The little one shook his head and thought to himself, Master is so shameless. How could he let third sister-in-law fight in the front while he absorbs resentment from behind? Really? The Azure Dragon and the Fire Qilin also knew what was going on. Normally, evil spirits would not appear in front of their masters. Once they sensed danger, they would immediately run away. However, if the princess consort was in front to cover for the master, it would be difficult for the ghosts to detect the master's presence. At that time, as long as the master stood there, he would be bathed in resentment. Although it was wrong to talk about master behind his back. However, some of master's actions were really unacceptable. Bailey Jiaju, on the other hand, was very calm. He glanced at the 3 of them coldly and said in a calm voice, if you have the ability, you should also find someone to help you get food. Forget about little 7, but Qilin, your embroidery skills are not bad. It has been a few hundred years, where is the female spirit beast that you found? The Fire Qilin stretched its neck and turned its face away, crying. You can't attack me like this. You clearly know that I haven't found my other half yet. You even mentioned that I found a female spirit beast. Master must be doing this on purpose. Why are you crying? The Ligaju casually comforted it with his consciousness. If you really can't do it, I'll let the Azure Dragon marry you. The Fire Qilin was at a loss for words. What did I just hear? The Azure Dragon was at a loss for words. Hellion Wei Wei turned her head to look at those 2 mythical beasts who had transformed into human shadows. She only felt that His Highness' words seemed to have poked an unknown acupoint on their bodies, making those 2 devilishly handsome faces turn into frightened expressions in a matter of minutes. It was too scary. The little one watched silently from the side. Once again, he confirmed his intention of hugging his master's thigh. He took a small step forward and squatted beside Bailey Jiaju's feet, looking dignified. The people outside couldn't see the Fire Qilin and the Azure Dragon, so they naturally didn't know what was going on. They only saw the 3rd prince standing in the middle of the hall. The ministers of the War Dragon Dynasty were very nervous. The 3rd prince was different from the other princes. Once he decided on something, he wouldn't allow anyone to say no. However, the 3rd prince had never come into contact with the art of exorcism. If anything happened to him, what would the War Dragon Dynasty do? Zongjing Yuer didn't want to see Baligaju in danger. At this time, she couldn't help but speak up. Her soft voice was filled with anxiety. Royal, evil spirits are different from humans. Once they possess you, the consequences will be unimaginable. You'd better, Yuer. Zongjing Wenren's cold voice interrupted her. He stood tall in the middle of the hall and looked at Baligaju. Since Brother Bailey wants to try, you don't have to persuade him anymore. Go and watch. Zongjing Yuer clenched her right hand. Brother, you promised me that you would try your best to negotiate. I want to negotiate. As long as Brother Bailey agrees to marry you as his wife, there's no need for this competition. Zhong Jingwenren stood with his hands behind his back. He looked very calm. It all depends on Brother Bailey's choice. Zhong Jingyuer's eyes were filled with hope. She looked at Beligaju. However, the man didn't look in her direction at all. He only stroked Hellion Vivian's hair with one hand. Even the side of his face was so noble that no one could disturb him. Zhong Jingyuer couldn't help but yell at Hellion Vivian, would the third princess consort rather watch the royal put himself in danger than take a step back? Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows and looked in Zhong Jingyuer's direction. With a queenly aura, she said, he is the safest by my side. Why should I take a step back? Also, Princess Zongjing, didn't your mother teach you not to touch other people's things casually? Beligaju is mine. How many times do I have to say this before you understand? Do you have to think of me that way? Zhong Jingyuer bit her lip and looked at Beligaju affectionately. I just don't want the royal to get hurt. At this moment, Bailey Jiaju finally glanced at Zhong Jingyuer. However, his gaze was cold, and his tone was as calm as ever. People of the Xianyuan dynasty, if you still want your princess to keep her life, you better shut her up now. Chapter 665. Everyone turned to look at Zhong Jingyuer when they heard what Beligaju said. The meaning in his eyes was obvious. What kind of woman was she? The third prince had already made himself clear, yet she still dared to approach him shamelessly. The Xianyuan kingdom was a big country after all. This was too embarrassing. Zhong Jingyuer initially thought that Beligaju would at least give her some face since she was the princess of a country. However, she did not expect him to be so resolute. Elder Su Wu's expression darkened as well. He stepped forward and held Zhong Jingyuer's hand. He lowered his voice and said, Princess, please don't say any more. The third prince is a stubborn person. Your reputation will be affected if you continue speaking. Zhong Jingyuer knew how the people around her were looking at her. She felt as if she had been slapped in the face. Her face hurt terribly. She did not understand why he was not touched by her concern for him. Instead, he wanted to kill her. Why did he do that? Zhong Jingyuer's eyes turned red. As her brother, Zhong Jingwenren could not bear to see his sister being rejected like this. The coldness on his face deepened as he asked, Brother Bailey, have you not considered the future relationship between the two countries when you spoke? Bailey Jiaju glanced at him and said in a cold tone, before considering the relationship between the two countries, shouldn't you teach your sister not to lose her modesty just because she likes a man? Or is it because the customs of the Xianyuan kingdom are so open to the extent that they can cast aside honor, shame, and etiquette? Almost every word of Bailey Jiaju's made people speechless. Even the exorcists from the Xianyuan kingdom felt that their princess's behavior was too shameful. They all looked at Zhong Jingwenren. Zhong Jingwenren clenched his fists. He did not expect such an outcome before he came to the capital city. His sister was supposed to be married to the Xianyuan kingdom. This way, not only would they gain face for the Xianyuan dynasty, but they could also use the marriage between the two countries to keep the infantry in the capital. Now, Zhong Jingwenren narrowed his eyes, but his smile did not fade. Before I came to the capital city, your country's minister brought up the matter of the marriage alliance. However, since Brother Bailey has already beheaded that minister, you will not mention this matter in the future. It's not a big deal. You is just being kind and wanted to remind Brother Bailey. Brother Bailey, don't you think you're making a mountain out of a molehill by mentioning etiquette, justice, integrity, and shame? Initially, Zhong Jingyuer was eager to talk about this matter. However, after Zhong Jingwenren's explanation, it became an agreement between the two nations. Just as Hellion Weiwei was thinking about how to answer on behalf of His Highness, she heard a deep sneer in her ear. You're so kind that you insist on breaking up others and being their concubine. The Xianyuan dynasty's definition of kindness is really eye-opening. Zhong Jingwenren was at a loss for words, and his face turned pale. Even Zhong Jingyuer wished she could find a hole in the ground and hide in it. Stifled laughter could be heard all around them. Hellion Vivian felt that there was no need for them to compete anymore. His Highness's mouth could kill people without them noticing. Zhong Jingwenren seemed to have realized that he could not gain the upper hand with his words. He glanced at the two exorcists who were possessed by the malicious spirit and his eyes darkened. Since Brother Bailey doesn't appreciate my kindness, let's see who's stronger during the competition. Malicious spirits are different from humans. They can't be subdued just by talking. Brother Bailey, please be careful when the time comes and don't let anything bad happen. The ministers had been worried sick for Bailey Jiaju. Now that they heard Zongjing Wenren's words, the uneasiness in their hearts intensified. They looked at the two exorcists who were blocked by the peachwood sword. They kept extending their hands forward, and one of them even had a gloomy look in his eyes. Zongjing Wenren walked to the center of the hall and held a talisman in his hand. When he looked up, rich spiritual energy instantly appeared above the yellow talisman. Crown Prince Wenren is indeed amazing. The exorcists exclaimed in admiration. This is the first time I've seen such pure spiritual energy. I wonder what will happen when the judge comes out later. When Zongjing Wenren heard the commotion, the corners of his mouth curled up. Since Beligaju refused a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit, he would show him how he was going to win. You can release one of the exorcists who is possessed by the malicious spirit. Elder, please cooperate with me and purify him completely. Zongjing Wenren turned around and said to Elder Su Wu. Elder Su Wu also got into position and nodded at Zongjing Wenren. The person in charge of controlling the exorcists released his grip. Without the peachwood sword and the ghost binding rope, one of the exorcists who was possessed by the malicious spirit immediately pounced in Zongjing Wenren's direction. Zongjing Wenren kept chanting, and the yellow talisman in his hand seemed to have been guided. It floated in midair and a vague figure could be seen there. He was wearing a long black robe and a paper hat that only the dead would wear. He was staring at the malicious spirit. The malicious spirit immediately gave up on Zongjing Wenren and turned around to bite Elder Su Wu. Its speed was so fast that it did not seem like a living person at all. Its teeth moved up and down, and it was extremely terrifying. If one did not want to be possessed by the malicious spirit, one must not have any physical contact with the possessed person. Even touching the possessed person was forbidden. This was the most difficult obstacle for the exorcists. Now that there was a judge, the malicious spirit had begun to struggle out of its original body. Whoever it came into contact with would immediately be possessed. Zongjing Wenren's plan was to completely destroy it the moment it was fully unleashed. Elder Su Wu chanted an incantation and erected a barrier in front of him. The malicious spirit stretched out its claws and scratched continuously. Zongjing Wenren quickly turned around and released the second yellow talisman. The third yellow talisman, the fourth yellow talisman. Originally, he had to release the fifth yellow talisman before he could be considered to have succeeded. This was because the north, south, east, west, and west were meant to trap the malicious spirit. The fifth yellow talisman was the one that struck the malicious spirit. Chapter 666. What? When the crowd heard this, they stood up in bewilderment. What should we do? This was the first time Elder Su Wu had encountered such a situation. Zongjing Wenren was ruthless. His eyes darkened as he said, "Shatter his soul. If that's the case, I'm afraid that the person possessed by him will not regain his intelligence." Elder Su Wu considered this point and turned to the emissary in the distance and said, "There's a problem. Malicious ghosts can't enter hell. After a long time, once the judge leaves, the malicious ghost's evil aura will increase greatly. When that happens, none of us will be able to control it. We have to shatter the malicious ghost soul immediately. Lord Wang, you better be mentally prepared. This fellow cultivator can at most keep his life. Don't ask for too much." When the exorcists heard that malicious ghosts could not enter hell, they knew that things had gone south. Logically speaking, no matter what kind of ghost it was, as long as the judge appeared, he would be able to take it away. However, this time, the judge refused to do so. They wanted to know the reason as they wanted to know what was going on. However, only Zongjing Wenren was able to go against the judge. However, it was obvious that the malicious ghost's violent nature did not allow them to think further. Zongjing Wenren's yellow talismans began to lose their spiritual glow. The malicious ghost was about to break free from its cage. Zongjing Wenren flicked his finger and all the yellow talismans that were suspended in midair flew toward the malicious ghost. Then, he flicked his peachwood sword and pierced through the malicious ghost's head. The malicious ghost first moved its empty eyes. Then, it looked to the side and black fog flowed out like water. Zongjing Wenren did not expect the malicious spirit to be so difficult to deal with. With the suppression of the 5 yellow talismans, the malicious spirit was rendered immobile. Its entire body collapsed on the ground and shattered into pieces. However, its pair of eyes were still so cold that it made people feel uncomfortable. In the end, only the exorcist who was lying on the ground was left behind after a gust of wind blew past. The black sharp nails on the exorcist's hands returned to their original color at a speed visible to the naked eye. However, he seemed to be in a daze, which was different from normal. Those who were familiar with the art of yin and yang knew that malicious ghosts could not be brought into hell. Once their souls were completely destroyed, it would definitely affect the person possessed. However, this was something that could not be helped. Taking the danger that they had just witnessed as an example, it was fortunate that Zongjing Wenren was the one who did it. If it had been any one of them, they would have failed to cast the spell. Not only would they not be able to eliminate the malicious spirit, but they might even become the next target for the malicious spirit to possess. Such a result was already quite satisfactory. Zongjing Wenren was indeed powerful. The exorcists turned their heads, their eyes filled with admiration. Zongjing Wenren swung his hand that was in pain. He had a perfect smile on his face. Only he knew how dangerous it was just now, but there was no need for others to see it. Elder, look at how long we've taken. Don't take too long. Elder Suwu smiled and said, the time it takes to burn a stick of incense, but it doesn't matter if it's a little longer. Just treat it as giving way to the royal family. Elder, you're so thoughtful. I forgot that Brother Bailey has never learned the art of exorcism. I'm sure you don't know the dangers involved. Zongjing Wenren smiled and turned his head to look at Beligaju. Brother Bailey, it's your turn now. Do you need me to teach you something? Those who were smart could tell that Zongjing Wenren was trying to get back at Zongjing Wenren. After all, this was a competition between the two countries. At this time, the prince of one country said that he wanted to teach the prince of the other country. He was obviously mocking the prince of the other country. When Beligaju heard this, he lifted his eyelids. He did not look at Zongjing Wenren. He stood tall and straight in the area where the competition was about to begin. His black robe draped over his shoulders, and his back was straight. His legs were long to begin with, and now that he was dressed in black, it made him look even more noble and tall. The originally small area seemed to have turned into a huge palace with him standing there. It was both dazzling and sinister. Regardless of which it was, Zongjing Wenren, the crown prince, was nothing in front of him. Not to mention, he said slowly and infuriatingly, I see that you've put in a lot of effort to subdue the ghost. You almost got yourself killed. I don't want to teach you anything. Zongjing Wenren's face instantly darkened. He tightened his grip on his peachwood sword. The exorcist from Huangzi Nation could not stand it anymore. He said with a fake smile, Royal, in that situation just now, no one would be able to escape unscathed. His Highness Wenren is already very powerful. If you were to go up there, who knows what would happen? Exorcising ghosts is different from fighting a war. The Royal should not mix them up. That's right. Fighting a war is so easy. All you have to do is to draw a white knife and draw a red knife. When it comes to exorcising ghosts, other than guarding against the cunning of the malicious ghosts, you have to be dignified and not be affected by the evil aura. Brute force and martial chi are not enough. The Royal should not underestimate the enemy. The other exorcists also chimed in. They sounded like the War Dragon dynasty was bound to lose. Beligaju did not waste his breath on them. He just stood there calmly, waiting for the competition to begin. Helian Weiwei laughed. Her voice was not loud, but it was very lazy. However, it was clear enough for everyone to hear. Someone, why don't we use brute force to exorcise the ghost today? Stand back a little more. Isn't this far enough? Bailey Jiaju had always treated Helian Weiwei differently. His pair of dark eyes were obviously much gentler, with a strong sense of indulgence. Helian Vivian lowered her voice so that only the two of them could hear. That's not enough. Don't think that I don't know why those reapers ran away so quickly. They were scared by you. This time, you have to stay further away. Otherwise, the malicious ghosts won't dare to come over. How can we exorcise ghosts then? With you in front, they won't notice me. Beligaju laughed evilly. Helian Weiwei was very good at listening to the main point. His Highness was referring to them, which meant that other than the Reapers, all the dark creatures would not be able to detect the dangerous aura emitted from His Highness. Was all this because of her? The reason why demons made a contract with humans is because humans can be a good cover for you, right? Helian Vivian raised her eyebrows. Beligaju smiled and did not deny it. His little one had always been smart, and this time was no exception. How cunning! Helian Vivian continued to stand in front. Since His Highness' aura would not be discovered, she had nothing to worry about. Come on, come on! Helian Weiwei's thin lips curved upwards as she formed a palm with one hand. An invisible spiritual aura brewed from the earth and condensed between her 5 fingers. Release the ghost. Chapter 667. As soon as Helian Vivian finished speaking, the person who was controlling the malicious ghost loosened the demon binding rope. The exorcist, who had been quietly lowering his head, did not pounce forward like the previous one. He just stood there, and his expression could not be seen. A disturbing aura surged out of his body. The people sitting at the periphery looked at each other. What's going on? Why is it so quiet? This malicious ghost looks quite peaceful. No, no. He's not peaceful. Look at his hands. In addition to the terrifying black fingernails, his hands were covered with a thin layer of frost. He's changed. He's changed. Almost all the exorcists knew that once a person possessed by a malicious ghost changed, he would become very terrifying. Because the exorcist had been lowering his head, no one noticed his condition. Now that the demon binding rope was removed, the gloomy aura rushed out in an instant. The exorcist finally raised his head. His whole face reflected the gloomy aura. He did not move, as if he was waiting for something. He slowly raised his head. What is he doing? Absorbing the essence of the moonlight. Oh no! This malicious ghost has successfully changed. It's impossible for the third prince and the third princess consort to subdue it. We have to think of a way quickly. What about Crown Prince Wenren? With Crown Prince Wenren's protection, there should be no problem, right? I've never heard of anyone subduing a transformed malicious ghost. Crown Prince Wenren is the same. You mean that even Crown Prince Wenren may not be able to deal with it? Yes. Then, the third princess consort, Hellion Vivian, was getting more and more worried. For some reason, there was suddenly lightning and thunder outside the hall. The malicious ghost lowered his eyes and looked in the direction of Hellion Vivian. He opened his mouth, and the resentment in his mouth gushed out just like that. At this time, everyone saw his teeth clearly. They were no longer human teeth. Instead, they were like those of a zombie that had just been unearthed. They were sharp and protruding from his lower lip. Hellion Vivian narrowed her eyes. The moment she raised one hand, spiritual energy rushed to the sky. She did not bring any yellow talismans, but all the yellow talismans present were under her control. Swoosh! All of them were erected in the air. A total of 18 of them formed a dazzling circle of Buddhist light. That's right. The exorcist stood up excitedly and stared at Hellion Vivian in disbelief. Their eyes shone intensely, the divine seal of the exorcist tribe. That's impossible. Zongjing Yuer denied with all her might, but she could not change the fact that the 18 rays of Buddha's light were about to descend. How could this be? How could this woman be from the exorcising tribe? This was definitely a lie. She had seen Hellion Vivian before, but she had never heard her mention the exorcising tribe. But how was he going to explain the 18 divine seals now? When Elder Suwu saw this, his expression changed as well. He knew better than anyone that the protector of the exorcising tribe had always been the young master. But now, someone had actually used the 18 divine seals of the exorcising tribe. Once such a person appeared, could he and the crown prince still win? As if he had seen through Elder Suwu's thoughts, Zongjing Wenren's eyes darkened and he said stiffly, "Everything is not over yet. Hellion Vivian has indeed exceeded our expectations, but there is a crucial weakness in their team, and that is, the third prince of the War Dragon dynasty." With that, Zongjing Wenren looked in the direction of Beligaju and said confidently, "With the 18 divine seals as cover, we can't see anything wrong. But an evil spirit that has successfully undergone a metamorphosis is never easy to deal with. Once it discovers the weakness in the team, it will attack that divine seal in a frenzy. When that happens, no matter how powerful Hellion Vivian is, she won't be able to save Beligaju." As if to verify Zongjing Wenren's words, the evil spirit looked at the 18 yellow divine seals above its head. It was smart enough not to move forward. Instead, it stood in its original position and sniffed. Then, it spat out a lot of resentment from its fangs. "Boss, what is it doing?" One of the reapers who had been hiding in the dark looked furtively at the center of the hall. Another reaper turned around with a poker face, but he could not hide the gloating in his tone. "That evil spirit is planning to attack the great demon king." The reapers were speechless. They could already see the ending. They were both ghosts, so why did they have to court death? However, it was too much for their boss's expressionless face to show that he was gloating. "Fourth brother, go and inform the judges. Tell them not to come out no matter what. Even if they are summoned, they should not come out. The great demon king's aura has been concealed. Once he comes out, they will definitely be scared to death." Fourth brother trembled as he said, "I don't dare to go out. The great demon king will see me. He doesn't have time for you now. Go." Boss urged, wanting to push fourth brother out of the hall. Right at this moment, the evil spirit seemed to have smelled something. Suddenly, its eyes darkened, and its fangs ground together as it murmured, "It smells so good. It smells so good. It smells like human flesh." As it spoke, it looked in the direction of Beligaju. Its pupils moved strangely, revealing the whites of its eyes. "It's there. This skin is not bad. After I devour his soul, I can use it as this body." As the evil spirit spoke, it twisted its head and finally stabilized its body. It no longer cared about the danger of Hellion Vivian's 18 yellow talismans and directly rushed towards the weakest human it thought to be. It smells so good. It could smell the scent coming from this human's body. This human is definitely not a good person. It could feel the resentment coming from his body. It was so thick and so pure. The fragrance that belonged exclusively to the darkness made him want to swallow it all into his stomach right now. It did not expect this man to have a better texture than the spiritual flesh of the exorcists it possessed. It was an unexpected gain. As long as it forcibly took over this man's body before the judges arrived, even the emperor would not be able to subdue it. The evil spirit thought viciously. Too weak, too easy to take over. It was practically a body tailor-made for ghosts. Such a crazy idea made him even faster. It seemed like he had rushed to the front of Bailey Jiaju in an instant. "Your Highness!" Lu Yu screamed in horror. Oh no, once the evil spirit touches him, he will immediately be possessed. Then, His Highness will be in danger. "Your Highness, get out of the way." However, it was too late. The evil spirit was already in front of Beligaju. The two of them were so close that they could touch each other if they stretched out their hands. Chapter 668. Lu Yu's entire face was filled with fear. This was because he was standing on Beligaju's right side. Even though he was quite a distance away, he could still see the malicious spirit's fangs as it rushed over. It's over. That was the only thought left in everyone's mind. The young man no longer dared to look and closed his eyes tightly. Elder Su Wu and the rest had different thoughts from the War Dragon Kingdom's ministers, especially Zongjing Wenren. If they could use the malicious spirit to get rid of Beligaju, then the rest would be much easier. As long as Beligaju was dead, they could immediately obtain the right to guard the imperial capital seal. After all, apart from Beligaju, there was no other reliable prince in the War Dragon Kingdom. In addition, there were the old ministers left behind by the previous emperor. It would be a piece of cake for them to take over the entire War Dragon Kingdom. The malicious spirit that had rushed over mocked in its heart. This human must have been scared out of his wits. That was why he did not even dare to move. This was perfect. It would be easier for it to devour him. The malicious spirit bared its fangs. Soon, it would be able to devour this soul that was afraid of darkness and obtain this perfect body. Just as everyone was holding their breaths, Beligaju remained standing in the same spot. His head was slightly lowered and his ink-black hair covered his eyes. As he stood in the darkness, no one could see his face clearly. They could only vaguely see that the corners of his mouth were slightly raised. It was a devilish smile. At that moment, the malicious spirit finally arrived in front of Beligaju. No. This person is not human at all. An unusual sense of uneasiness surged from the depths of the malicious spirit's blood. It instinctively wanted to turn around and run away. What? You don't want to take over my body anymore? Bailey Jiaju slowly raised his eyes. The demonic aura that flowed out from his eyes made the malicious spirit feel as if its limbs were being pinched by the other party. Pain came from its internal organs. The man did not do anything, but it already felt the horror of falling into hell. Invisible black feathers fell from the sky and landed beside the malicious spirit one by one. If fear could be seen on a ghost's face, the malicious ghost would have wished that he had never appeared here in the first place. How could this be? How could there be an evil spirit more powerful than him in the capital? No, that's not right. This man was not a ghost. You, who are you? The specter sensed the vibration coming from his left hand. Even if the other party wasn't a human and was also from hell, he shouldn't have been able to suppress it to such an extent. Beligaju glanced at him indifferently. At that moment, his long and narrow eyes emitted a golden glow that nailed the malicious spirit to the ground. You are. The malicious spirit opened its mouth wide in disbelief, and its eyes shook violently. It looked like a mouse that had seen a cat. It trembled and did not dare to say that name. How could this be? If it was that person. It was impossible for it not to sense the other party's aura. Could it be? The hostile ghost seemed to have understood something all of a sudden. It turned its head and looked at Hellion Wei Wei. It was her. This woman's pure aura perfectly covered up her soaring demonic nature. It made it mistakenly think that the other party was just an ordinary human. So, that man had really returned. The fear in the malicious spirit's eyes was so obvious. But the people outside could not see this scene. From the moment the malicious spirit pounced to when it was nailed in midair, everything happened too quickly. Other than Hellion Vivian and Xiao Qi, no one knew why the malicious spirit suddenly stopped. People only had time to see Beligaju's body sway, and his fingers seemed to have pierced through the malicious spirit's heart, making it difficult for people to see clearly. There was a loud bang. In the thick darkness, as the black feather fell, the malicious spirit froze in place, and watched as its body started to crack from the chest, and finally, it was shattered into black powder, completely disappearing into the air. From the beginning to the end, this scene was shockingly fast. No one dared to believe what they had just seen. By the time they regained their senses, the Ligaju had already straightened his body. The tip of his tongue seemed to have licked the corner of his mouth, but this action was so subtle that other than Helly and Vivian, no one else noticed. All they could see was him adjusting his collar and gloves, so elegant and indifferent, as if the malicious spirit behind him was just a small passerby to him. Zongjingwenren was speechless, and his face was ashen. How could this be? How could Beligaju tear apart a malicious spirit with his bare hands? Elder Suwu also did not expect things to turn out this way. He looked at Beligaju, and for the first time, his eyes were filled with fear. This third prince was too uncontrollable. And that Hellion Vivian. 18 yellow talismans, even the crown prince could not do that. But Hellion Vivian could use the binding of seals so easily. Plus, there was Beligaju, this terrifying man. Once the two of them joined forces, he could not even imagine how powerful they would be in the future. At least for now, he was starting to feel fear in his heart. But he did not know if the young master was aware of this. Elder Suwu lowered his head. Hellion Vivian and Beligaju would definitely be obstacles in their way of breaking the seal. Because these two people were too powerful. What happened just now? The exorcists opened their eyes wide as they muttered, and reached out to tug at their companions. The other exorcist was also in a daze. This was the first time he had seen such a scene, and he felt a little uneasy. Lu Yu and Wu Jing looked at each other, and their faces were filled with genuine shock. They had always known that the royal family was powerful. But they never knew that the royal family was so powerful. They could even tear ghosts apart? Why would they need exorcists? At the same time, the great hall became extremely quiet. Everyone seemed to have forgotten how to breathe as they watched the godlike man walk out from the darkness. Then, he stopped in front of Hellion Vivian. Hellion Vivian had already raised her left arm and smiled. Just like the first time they fought side by side in the White Academy, the two of them clapped their hands handsomely. Perfect cooperation, cool to the extreme. The third Princess Consort knew that His Highness would win. No wonder. Ha 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 ha, His Highness is still the best. Some people say that exorcism is different from war, but in my opinion, they are the same. Didn't His Highness still beat them into pieces? Zongjingwenren had always been arrogant. When he heard such mockery, he gritted his teeth and said, "It's just an exorcism, why didn't a judge appear? How can it be considered a victory?" Chapter 669. The Crown Prince is right. There are two parts to this competition. One is to summon the judge, and the other is to destroy the malicious spirit. Elder Suwu took a step forward and looked back and forth. The royal family and the third Princess Consort are indeed very fast. They have destroyed the malicious spirit in the blink of an eye, but they have not summoned the judge yet. The exorcists looked at each other when they heard Elder Suwu's words. Under normal circumstances, the judge had to be summoned first, and the dark aura of the judge would be used to summon the malicious spirit out of its shell. However, this time, the malicious spirit was able to come out so quickly because of Hellion Vivian's 18 yellow talismans. She did not rely on external forces at all. Everyone knew that if they were to rely on their abilities alone, Hellion Vivian and Beligaju would definitely win. However, there were rules of the competition. If they did not summon the judge, they would be judged to have lost. This was the same as the first round. Someone was trying to use the rules of the competition to pressure them. Elder Suwu was good at acting. He shook his head and said, "Compared to the messengers, the Hell's Judge is not that easy to summon. It is understandable that he did not show up. After all, the malicious spirit is ferocious. The third Princess Consort must have spent all her energy on the malicious spirit and could not spare any energy to summon the judge. What a pity. To use 18 yellow talismans of exorcism would definitely consume a large amount of spiritual energy. Hellion Vivian was indeed powerful and difficult to deal with. However, she was still young and immature. She was too eager for quick success and only wanted to destroy the malicious spirit, so she used all her spiritual energy. Naturally, the judge would not appear. Elder Suwu smiled. He thought that the scene just now must have been Hellion Vivian's limit. This way, he would be able to figure out his opponent's abilities. However, he did not expect that Hellion Vivian would actually smile at this moment. Her lips were half-curved, and her voice was slow and languid. Who said that I did not summon the judge? What? Elder Suwu's expression changed, and he quickly turned his head. He saw her clench her fists, and her ink-black hair moved with the wind. Only now did people notice that the spiritual energy gathering in Hellion Vivian's palm was even more abundant than before. Hellion Weiwei stood there as the wind blew from all directions, filling up her cloak. However, she did not move a single step. Instead, she chanted a few incantations toward the fog that was surging in the darkness. Then, she squinted her eyes and said, "Appear." It was just one word, but it seemed to carry a huge sense of oppression. As soon as she finished speaking, a corner of the hall was rapidly covered in frost. The fog in the darkness surged even more violently, twisting into a ball, as if something was about to walk out of it. Every minister felt like they were suffocating. Following that, a loud bang was heard. Something fell to the ground, and the black fog immediately dispersed. In the middle of the empty hall, a 5-year-old boy suddenly appeared. He seemed to be still working, holding a seal with the word yen on it in one hand, and supporting his chin with the other. He looked like he had no interest in life, and he even had a pacifier in his mouth. He wore an ancient tall hat with the word yen written on it on his head, and was dressed in a pure black robe. His features were exquisite beyond description. He did not seem to have expected to suddenly appear in the human world. He froze in his original position for a moment, then cursed under his breath, "Who sent me to the ancient times? Even if you want to send me, you should send me to the modern era? You're deliberately trying to separate me from Little Hook. This is too much." This child is? The ministers were confused as they stared at the little boy sitting in the middle of the hall. Their expressions were full of confusion. Didn't they say that they were going to summon the judge? Why did a little boy appear? Number 4, don't you think that voice sounded a little familiar? The Reaper who was about to leave suddenly stopped in his tracks. Number 4 laughed in a very simple and honest manner. Yes, it sounded familiar. I thought I was back in hell again. How did I even hear the Little Highness voice? Wait, Little Highness? All the Reapers trembled as they collectively looked behind them. Holy shit. It really is the Little Highness. Oh no, the King of Hell had said that in order to prevent the Little Highness from falling in love at such an early age, he had to cut off all possibilities of him going out. Otherwise, they would be punished. Now, the Little Highness was actually summoned to the human world. He even had a face-to-face encounter with the great demon. What do we do? What should we do? The little King of Hell was very calm. He looked at the shocked gazes around him, then took out a small mirror and looked at himself. After making a very domineering pose, he sighed, "What a waste that I dressed so handsomely today, but I didn't get the chance to see Little Hook." Sigh. Hellion Vivian was standing behind him. From the moment the child appeared, she felt that his back was a little familiar. Now that she saw his actions, she was even more certain that she had seen this child before. At this time, the little King of Hell also turned his head around. His gaze swept across Hellion Vivian's face, and his eyebrows raised in surprise. Suddenly, he smiled evilly. "So it was you who summoned this king. What's wrong? Is it because you haven't been able to forget this king's beauty since the last time you saw this king?" Hellion Vivian. "You're just a 5-year-old child, what kind of beauty is there? You don't have a chance." The little King of Hell put away the mirror that he always carried with him, and said with a serious expression, "In this lifetime, I will only like Little Hook." Hellion Vivian. She was already married, okay. But I can give you a chance to kiss the back of my hand. The little King of Hell felt that he was being very considerate. Hearing this, Beligaju sneered and walked over from behind the little boy. His voice was slow, but his eyes were cold. "Then which hand do you not want?" The little King of Hell raised his head with great effort. The man's slender legs looked even more powerful from this angle, and the man's chiseled side profile was as fair as crystal. The man was looking down at him. The little King of Hell immediately choked on his own saliva. Big devil." The child instantly shut up. His amber eyes darted back and forth between Beligaju, and he turned around to run. He was going to go back to the underworld and capture all the ghost servants, and give them a good beating. Such a dangerous creature had returned, and he didn't even tell him. Didn't he know that among the few people that he was most afraid of in his life, there was a big devil with a black heart and a black lung? This person was too detestable. He remembered that he was still young back then. He was only about 3 years old, and he had just taken over his father's job. He was so busy every day. In addition to stamping the documents, he also had to supervise the ghost servants. Thinking about it, it wasn't easy at all. It made him look haggard. But this big devil, other than fighting with his father, actually had the time to come to the underworld to cause trouble. He even wanted him to tear up the book of life and death called Hellion Vivian, You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.